You've been told that stillness is something you must earn, that sanctuary exists somewhere far away, in a quiet mountain temple, or in a perfect life where nothing goes wrong. But if that were true, why do so many who chase it still feel restless, still feel a noise inside that never stops? The truth is, the stillness you're looking for isn't out there, it's within you. Beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, there is a sanctuary that has never moved, never broken, never left. Buddhism calls it the refuge within, the silent space behind your thoughts, the calm witness that watches everything come and go. When you touch it, you remember that peace was never lost, only hidden beneath the chaos of life. Tonight, as you listen, your breath will slow, your thoughts will soften, and you'll begin to feel that stillness rising from deep inside. Not something to reach for, but something that's always been waiting for you to return. This isn't just another talk about mindfulness. This is a journey back to yourself, to the stillness that heals, to the sanctuary that never fades within you. There is a stillness and a sanctuary, and tonight you will find your way home to it. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Let the noise of the world fade just a little. You've heard so many voices telling you to find peace in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next version of yourself. But here, we begin a different kind of search, one that doesn't take you outward, but inward. You are about to enter the monastery that walks with you, the temple that doesn't stand on a mountain, but breathes with you wherever you go. There's a quiet place within you that has never been touched by chaos. It's not built of stone or prayer flags, but of awareness. A living temple that exists in every breath you take. Most people spend their lives looking for refuge in the world, in homes, in people, in routines. They run from one thing to another, hoping that safety will come from control. But Buddhism teaches something different. Refuge is not a destination, it's a state of consciousness. It's what happens when you stop chasing the world and start returning to yourself. Think of your mind as a vast landscape. Most of the time, storms rage across it. Thoughts, memories, fears, desires. But deep beneath the surface, there is a still chamber that nothing can disturb. That is your inner monastery. You carry it everywhere, though you rarely step inside. It's the space in you that doesn't react, doesn't cling, doesn't resist. It simply watches. It is aware. And that awareness, pure and unshaken, is your true refuge. We often believe safety comes from being surrounded by the right conditions. Enough money, love, health, or order. Yet, if you've ever achieved those things, you already know how fragile they are. The moment life shifts, the peace they brought can vanish. The Buddha called this impermanence, the truth that everything changes. True refuge, then, cannot depend on anything that comes and goes. It must exist somewhere deeper, beyond the reach of loss. The mind, when untamed, searches for shelter in illusions. It clings to the idea that once I fix this, I'll finally rest. But that rest never comes, because the outer world never stops shifting. The real practice is learning to be still within movement, to find silence even as life roars around you. Meditation is not about escaping life. It's about returning to the only place that never leaves you, awareness itself. In monasteries around the world, monks rise before dawn to sit in silence. But you don't have to wear robes or shave your head to touch what they touch. The same stillness they find in stone halls exists in the space between your breaths. Your body is your temple, your awareness is the altar, and your breath is the prayer. When you sit in quiet presence, you enter that sacred space, the temple that walks with you. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The mind can go in 1,000 directions, but on this beautiful path, I walk in peace." That peace is not given by the path. It is carried by the one who walks it. Wherever you are, in traffic, in pain, in confusion, the monastery is already there. You don't need to go anywhere to find it. You only need to turn inward and listen. The first lesson of discovering the inner monastery is humility. The ego wants to claim the role of architect, to build, perfect, and decorate the temple of the self. But awareness doesn't need construction. It was complete long before you started searching. All the layers of identity, history, and self-image are just walls we've built around something that was never meant to be hidden. Refuge is not adding, it's removing. It's peeling back everything that isn't real until all that remains is what's eternal. Every time you return to your breath, you step across the threshold. The world outside may be noisy, people demanding, schedules overflowing, but the temple inside has only one sound: silence. It's not the silence of emptiness, but of presence. When you touch it, anxiety softens. Restlessness loses its power. You start to realize that nothing outside you has to change for you to be at peace. The second lesson is about ownership. Most people believe they can only feel calm when they find the right environment. But if peace depends on your surroundings, you're a prisoner of circumstance. The inner monastery frees you from that. You begin to see that calm is not something the world gives, it's something you bring. When your awareness becomes your refuge, you carry home with you everywhere. Think about it. All your life you've been told to find yourself, but you were never lost. You were only distracted. The monastery within has always been open, waiting for you to notice you've walked past its doorway 1,000 times. Every time you paused before reacting, every time you took a conscious breath instead of arguing, every time you felt wonder without needing a reason. Those were glimpses of the sanctuary you already carry. The third lesson is surrender. In Buddhism, the act of taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, teaching, and the Sangha, community, is not about worshipping something outside you. It's about recognizing those qualities within. The Buddha represents awakening, the Dharma represents truth, and the Sangha represents shared presence. Together, they form the architecture of your inner monastery. To surrender to them is not weakness. It's returning to wholeness. When you rest in awareness, you're no longer trying to be anything. You're no longer trapped in the performance of self, the endless cycle of proving, pleasing, achieving. You just are. In that being, there's a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't depend on applause or certainty, the kind that lets you walk through life with steady grace. Inside the inner monastery, time feels different. The mind, always racing ahead or replaying the past, finally slows down. Here, there's no future to reach, no past to fix. There's only this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness. And within that awareness, you find something astonishing: contentment. You start to see that happiness was never missing. You were simply looking for it in the wrong direction. The fourth lesson is integration. Awareness is not meant to stay locked in meditation. The monastery isn't a retreat from life. It's a way of living. When you bring stillness into action, the ordinary becomes sacred. Washing dishes becomes a prayer. Walking becomes meditation. Speaking becomes mindfulness in motion. Every act done with presence is part of the temple's ritual. Many people think spirituality requires renunciation, that you must abandon the world to find truth. But the Buddha himself taught the middle way. Not indulgence, not denial, but balance. The monastery within honors both stillness and movement, both solitude and connection. You can work, love, struggle, and still remain anchored in awareness. Refuge is not escape, it's participation without losing yourself. The fifth lesson is about protection. When you live from awareness, you become untouchable by the storms of life. That doesn't mean you stop feeling pain. It means pain can no longer define you. It passes through you like wind through an open window. Awareness doesn't block emotion. It allows it to move freely without resistance. The walls of your inner temple are not built of stone, but openness. Nothing can shatter them because they do not close. You begin to understand that what you are is not the voice in your head, but the space in which the voice speaks. That space, pure, clear, infinite, is what Buddhists call the nature of mind. Thoughts come and go, but awareness remains untouched. This is why the monastery is portable. You don't have to defend it, because nothing can enter it that doesn't already belong. As your practice deepens, the distinction between inner and outer begins to fade. The world itself becomes an extension of the temple. The laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of your breath, all of it belongs to the same silence. You start to feel that life is not happening to you. It's happening within you. The boundaries dissolve, and what's left is intimacy with everything. This realization changes how you live. You stop rushing. You start listening. You move through the world like someone walking through sacred ground. Every person becomes a teacher. Every challenge becomes a bell, calling you back to awareness. Even suffering becomes a doorway. The monastery doesn't protect you from difficulty. It reveals that difficulty itself can awaken you. The sixth lesson is gratitude. Awareness brings with it a natural appreciation. When you see clearly, even the smallest things feel miraculous. A sip of water, the warmth of sunlight, the stillness between sounds. Gratitude arises not because life is perfect, but because you finally see it as it is. You stop demanding that the world match your expectations and start bowing to its reality. This is freedom, not control, but acceptance. The seventh lesson is companionship. Inside the monastery, you're never alone. Even in silence, there's presence. The awareness that watches your life is the same awareness that animates everyone else. You begin to sense that separation was always an illusion, a trick of perception. Beneath the surface, we all share the same ground of being. This understanding brings compassion, not as an ideal, but as a natural response. When you know that others are not different from you, kindness becomes effortless. In the end, discovering the temple that walks with you is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering what you've always been. The monastery has no doors because it was never closed. You were simply standing outside, knocking. Now you step inside and realize you've been home the whole time. When you finally rest in that awareness, life begins to unfold differently. You no longer chase peace, you carry it. You no longer seek refuge, you live from it. You become like the monks who walk barefoot through noisy markets, yet remain untouched by distraction. Still, steady, awake. And as you move forward, something subtle but profound happens. The outer world begins to mirror your inner stillness. People around you feel calmer. Conversations slow down. Even chaos seems to lose its edge. It's not that the world changed. You did. Your presence became a sanctuary for others, just as your awareness became a sanctuary for you. So, as you continue this journey, remember, the monastery isn't far away. It's here, now, in the space between your thoughts, in the pause before your next breath. Within you, there is a stillness and a sanctuary. And once you enter it, you'll never truly leave again. When you discover the temple within, something subtle begins to happen. The noise that once seemed so loud starts to soften, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship with it has. You begin to sense a quiet presence behind everything, something still, aware, untouched by thought. It doesn't argue. It doesn't react. It simply knows. That is the beginning of meeting the quiet witness, the self that never speaks yet knows all. Most people live their entire lives identified with the noise inside their heads. Thoughts run like an endless commentary, analyzing, judging, remembering, planning. From morning until night, the mind speaks, and we mistake its voice for our own. But beneath that voice, there is another awareness that watches it all. It notices every thought without being caught in it. That presence is not a thought. It's the space that thoughts appear in. It's what you really are when the noise fades for even a moment. The first step in recognizing this witness is to see that you are not the mind's story. You are the one hearing it. When anger rises, awareness sees it. When sadness passes, awareness remains. This presence does not have an opinion about what appears. It doesn't say, I like this thought, or I hate this emotion. It just watches. It's the quiet sky behind the changing weather of your mind. At first, this may sound abstract, but you've already experienced it many times. When you're lost in thought and suddenly realize you were thinking, who noticed that? When you feel anxious, but part of you says, I'm anxious right now. Who is aware of the anxiety? That awareness, silent and observing, is the witness. It never sleeps, never disappears. It was present in childhood, it's present now, and it will be present long after your current worries are gone. In Buddhist philosophy, this awareness is sometimes called pure consciousness. It's like a mirror that reflects everything but is not affected by what it reflects. You can stand before a mirror, smiling or crying. The reflection changes, but the mirror stays the same. Your awareness works the same way. It reflects thoughts, emotions, and sensations, yet remains clear and untouched. The mind resists this idea because it thrives on identity. It wants to say, "I am my thoughts," or "I am my feelings." But awareness doesn't need a name. It doesn't need validation. The moment you start to rest in this witnessing state, the mind begins to lose its grip. You realize that your worth was never tied to what you think or achieve. It was always here, in the simple fact that you exist and are aware. There's a deep peace in this recognition. You no longer have to control every emotion or silence every thought. You simply allow them to come and go, like waves rising and falling on the surface of the ocean. They move through you, but you remain the depth beneath. This is not indifference. It's freedom. You still feel, but you're no longer trapped inside what you feel. As you start to live from the perspective of the witness, daily life transforms. When someone criticizes you, instead of reacting instantly, awareness observes the sting in your chest, the impulse to defend, the story forming in your mind. You begin to see it all like a scene in a movie, vivid, but not ultimately who you are. The moment you recognize that, space opens up. That space is peace. It allows you to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. True meditation begins here, not in controlling thoughts, but in noticing the one who watches them. You can sit quietly and let your mind wander, but instead of getting caught, you stay as the watcher. At first, this feels subtle, like trying to see something that's always been behind you. But with practice, it becomes unmistakable. You start to see that everything you experience, joy, pain, memory, sound, arises in this same field of awareness. And that field has no boundary. Buddhist masters often use the analogy of space. Space holds everything, but nothing can stain it. A fire burns within it. Rain falls within it, yet space remains untouched. Likewise, awareness contains all experience but is never harmed by it. Realizing this changes how you relate to suffering. You begin to see pain not as an enemy, but as something that appears within you, not to punish, but to reveal the depth of your own stillness. When you rest in the witness, you no longer need to analyze every problem. You start to trust that awareness itself holds intelligence deeper than thought. The mind believes it must solve everything, but awareness doesn't solve, it sees. And in that seeing, many problems dissolve on their own. Often, what we call a solution is just the moment we stop fighting what is. There's also a humility that arises from living as the witness. You start to see how small your opinions are compared to the vastness of awareness itself. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to control how others see you. You no longer need to prove your worth because you realize you were never the personality struggling to be seen. You were the presence quietly observing the performance. This shift also brings compassion. When you see yourself as awareness, you see that same awareness in everyone else. The person arguing with you is also caught in their thoughts, believing those thoughts are who they are. You no longer need to take their anger personally. You begin to meet others from stillness instead of defensiveness. In that space, empathy grows naturally. There's a moment in deep awareness where you begin to sense that the witness itself is not separate from what it observes. At first, it feels like me watching my thoughts, but as your perception refines, you realize the boundary dissolves. Awareness is not inside you. Everything is inside awareness. This is what non-duality means, the recognition that subject and object are one continuous field of knowing. You and life are not two. This understanding is not meant to be an intellectual idea. It's something you feel directly. When you're fully present, watching the rain fall, listening to someone speak, feeling your breath, there's no gap between you and the moment awareness and experience merge into one seamless flow. That unity is what the Buddha called liberation. It's not dramatic, it's profoundly simple. As the witness strengthens, the grip of the ego weakens. The ego lives in constant commentary. I'm doing well, I'm failing, I'm loved, I'm not enough. Awareness doesn't play that game. It doesn't measure, compare, or seek validation. It just knows. When you live from that knowing, life stops feeling like a battle. The world doesn't shrink or disappear. You just stop taking it so personally. This is not about escaping emotion or becoming detached. The witness allows you to feel more deeply because you're no longer afraid of your own feelings. You can let sadness wash through you without clinging or resisting. You can let joy come and go without trying to hold on to it. This fluidity is freedom, not numbness, but openness. Over time, awareness becomes your natural resting place. You begin to wake up in the morning and sense it before thought even starts. It's the quiet background to your entire existence. You walk, eat, speak, work. And through it all, a silent knowing remains. That is the essence of presence. It's the same awareness that looked out through your eyes when you were a child, unchanged by the years. Many spiritual teachers describe this awakening as remembering rather than achieving. You don't become aware, you realize you've always been aware. The mind had simply been too loud to notice. It's like discovering that the sun was shining all along behind the clouds. The clouds didn't destroy the sun, they only covered it temporarily. When you start to live this truth, you no longer seek validation through thought. You realize that even your search for enlightenment was part of the mind's movement. The witness doesn't need to be enlightened. It already is. The work is simply to rest there again and again until it becomes effortless. Awareness is not passive. It's deeply alive. It holds intelligence that guides without words. Sometimes, when you rest in it, clarity arises by itself. You suddenly know what to do or say, not because you thought it through, but because the stillness itself revealed the next step. This is why intuition is so powerful. It's awareness speaking before the mind interferes. Another insight of the witness is that nothing ever truly belongs to you. Thoughts arise, emotions move, sensations come and go, but none of them are yours. They're like guests visiting your awareness. You can greet them kindly, let them stay for a moment, and then let them leave. This attitude removes the heaviness from experience. You no longer feel burdened by what passes through you because you know it's not you. This awareness also transforms how you relate to time. The mind lives in the past and future, replaying, anticipating, regretting. But the witness exists only in the present. When you rest as the watcher, time loses its grip. The moment becomes infinite. You begin to sense what eternity really means. Not endless time, but timeless presence. Living as awareness doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging with it more deeply, but from stillness rather than reactivity. You still make plans, love people, pursue goals, but you do it with a light touch. You move through life like water, responsive, adaptable, yet unshaken at your core. There's an ancient saying in the Zen tradition: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The actions remain the same, but the awareness behind them changes everything. You still live your ordinary life, but now everything you do happens within the clarity of the witness. Every task becomes sacred because you're fully there for it. The mind may still resist, trying to pull you back into identification, but each time you notice that, you're already free. The simple act of noticing a thought means you're not lost in it. That's the secret. Awakening is not about stopping thoughts. It's about recognizing you are not them. Eventually, the witness and the witnessed merge completely. There's no longer you watching your mind. There is only awareness aware of itself, still, silent, infinite. From that place, compassion, wisdom, and peace flow naturally. You don't have to force them. They are the fragrance of stillness itself. When you live this way, you become a calm presence in a chaotic world. Others feel it, even if they can't name it. Your energy becomes steady, grounding, healing. You no longer have to preach or persuade. Your stillness speaks louder than words. This is what it means to be a light in the world, not through effort, but through being. And so, the temple within you, the monastery that walks with you, now has a living heart, the quiet witness. The awareness that never speaks yet knows all. When you rest in that awareness, life stops being something to survive and becomes something to behold. Everything that follows in this journey will deepen this knowing. How stillness reveals peace, how silence teaches, how awareness itself becomes love. But it all begins here, in the simple recognition of what has always been watching. The witness within you is the gateway to every sanctuary you will ever find. When you begin to live from awareness, something unexpected unfolds. The mind that once seemed loud and endless begins to quiet, but not completely. It still hums, it still moves, it still tries to pull you back into old patterns. And this is where many people get discouraged. They think, if I'm aware, why do I still feel restless? But here lies one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism, that restlessness itself can be the doorway to refuge. The agitation that feels like a problem is not a barrier to peace. It's the map leading you toward it. There's a kind of tension that lives in every human being, a subtle vibration beneath the surface of our daily lives. You feel it when you can't sit still, when your phone becomes your escape, when you keep checking the clock even though you have nowhere to be. It's the nervous hum that says, something is missing. But if you pause long enough to feel it fully, you start to notice that this restlessness is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to guide you home. The restless mind is not your enemy, it's a misunderstood messenger. It appears loud because it's trying to show you where you've been disconnected from your center. Beneath every anxious thought, beneath every wave of unease, there's something else, a still point that never moves. Most of us spend our lives fighting restlessness, distracting ourselves, numbing ourselves, trying to get rid of it. But peace doesn't come from escape. It comes from descent, from daring to sink beneath the noise and meet what lies under it. When you sit quietly, you may notice a pressure in your chest or a swirl of energy behind your thoughts. The instinct is to run, to grab your phone, to move, to fix. But if you stay, if you breathe, and allow that discomfort to be seen, you'll notice it begins to soften on its own. Restlessness is like a wave crashing on the surface of the ocean. Awareness doesn't stop the wave. It reveals that beneath the turbulence, the ocean is calm. This is the hidden refuge beneath restlessness. The paradox that peace is not found by removing agitation, but by fully entering it. Every time you sit in stillness and face the storm instead of escaping it, you are practicing one of the most advanced forms of meditation. You're teaching your nervous system that it doesn't have to run. You're showing your heart that it can hold everything it feels without breaking. The Buddha compared the mind to a wild monkey leaping from branch to branch. But he also said that the way to tame the monkey is not through force, but through awareness. When you stop chasing thoughts or punishing yourself for distraction, the mind slowly settles. Not because you controlled it, but because you stopped fueling it with resistance. Restlessness is a sign that your awareness is expanding. It's the friction that happens when stillness begins to reveal what's been hidden under years of movement. Instead of judging it, learn to listen. Anxiety, boredom, overthinking, they all carry information. They show you where you've been disconnected from presence. When you welcome them, they transform. The energy that once felt chaotic begins to turn into clarity. When you drop into this deeper stillness, something profound happens to your relationship with discomfort. You stop labeling sensations as good or bad. You start to experience them as energy moving through space. The agitation in your chest is no longer a problem to solve, but a vibration to observe. And as you observe without judgment, it begins to dissolve back into the stillness it came from. Many people try to meditate by forcing themselves to be calm. They sit down, close their eyes, and immediately fight the noise in their minds. But awareness doesn't fight, it allows. Meditation isn't about stopping the mind, it's about letting the mind be seen by something larger, your consciousness itself. When you truly allow your restlessness, you begin to sense that there is an awareness untouched by it. That awareness is your refuge. In the language of Buddhism, this is the practice of turning toward. When discomfort arises, you turn toward it instead of away. You breathe into it, not as a technique to fix it, but as an act of compassion. You acknowledge its presence. I see you. I feel you. You are allowed here. The simple act of allowing transforms resistance into acceptance and acceptance into peace. There's a physiological wisdom in this too. Neuroscience shows that when you stop resisting emotional discomfort, your nervous system begins to regulate. The body moves from fight or flight to rest and digest. Awareness literally changes your biochemistry. The still point beneath restlessness is not just poetic, it's biological truth. The body, when met with compassion, heals itself. Every emotion you've ever run from has been waiting to be held in awareness. Anxiety, guilt, fear, all of them soften when they are finally allowed to exist. Beneath them, there is always stillness, like sunlight beneath the clouds. The mind creates storms, but awareness remains clear sky. To descend into stillness, you don't need a special method. You simply need courage. The courage to stay when the mind says, run. The courage to feel instead of fix. When you do this, a mysterious thing happens. The energy that once fueled anxiety begins to flow differently. It becomes presence, alertness, even tenderness. What once felt like chaos begins to reveal an intelligence of its own. This is why great Buddhist teachers often say that suffering is a teacher. Restlessness, when entered consciously, becomes the path itself. Every tremor of discomfort is an invitation to deepen awareness. The more you meet it without resistance, the more it transforms from agitation into spaciousness. What you once feared becomes your doorway to peace. Think about how rivers move. When water meets an obstacle, it doesn't fight. It flows around it, reshaping itself to the moment. Awareness works the same way. When you rest as awareness, you no longer try to change the flow of life. You let it move through you. Restlessness becomes just another current, passing through a river that never stops being whole. There's a quiet dignity in this kind of surrender. Not defeat, but trust. Trust that you can face anything that arises without losing yourself. When you find that still point beneath movement, you realize that even chaos serves you. It humbles you, softens you, opens you. Every restless moment becomes a teacher in disguise. The practice deepens when you bring this awareness into daily life. You might notice tension building during a conversation, or a familiar anxiety when plans change. In those moments, pause, feel the body. Acknowledge what's here without judgment. The still point is always one breath away, waiting for you to return. As you develop this sensitivity, you begin to sense that stillness doesn't mean absence of movement. It's the stability within motion, the silence that holds every sound. Even when you're active, you can feel the ground of awareness beneath your actions. This is how you live from sanctuary in the middle of life's noise. One of the most profound paradoxes in Buddhist wisdom is that enlightenment doesn't remove human experience. It transforms how you meet it. Restlessness doesn't vanish. It simply loses the power to disturb you. It becomes part of the dance, movement happening within stillness. Eventually, you begin to sense that there's no true separation between the restlessness and the refuge. The two are one continuous movement, like waves and ocean. Without the waves, you'd never know the depth of the sea. Without agitation, you'd never discover how deep your peace goes. This is the hidden blessing of restlessness. It forces you inward until you touch what cannot be moved. The mind will still create noise. That's its nature. But now, instead of fighting it, you recognize it as background music. You no longer confuse the soundtrack with the silence that holds it. You can let thoughts pass like wind through open windows. Awareness remains still, even as everything else changes. This understanding turns ordinary moments into profound ones. Waiting in line becomes meditation. Frustration becomes a reminder to breathe. Even conflict becomes a mirror reflecting where peace is hiding beneath reaction. Life stops being divided into spiritual and ordinary. Everything becomes part of your practice. Over time, the refuge beneath restlessness becomes so familiar that even in chaos, you know how to return. You can be in a crowded room, in grief, in uncertainty, and still feel that quiet hum of awareness beneath it all. You stop needing perfect conditions to be at peace. You found something stronger than calm. You found stillness in motion. This is what the Buddha meant by liberation. Not the absence of emotion, but freedom from being controlled by it. You still feel everything, but you no longer drown in it. The ocean of awareness holds every wave without losing its depth. So the next time restlessness visits you, don't push it away. Greet it like an old friend bringing a message. Sit with it. Listen. Beneath its movement, you'll find the same stillness you touched in your inner monastery, the same awareness you met as the quiet witness. It's all one sanctuary, layered, living, breathing through you. In that moment, you realize something extraordinary. What you were running from was never the problem. The running was. When you stop running, even the storm becomes holy. The noise becomes music. The restlessness becomes the path home. And from that home, the still point beneath all movement, life begins to flow differently. You no longer seek peace in perfect conditions. You carry it within you, in the space beneath every anxious thought, in the pause before every reaction, in the gentle breath that says, I am here. The hidden refuge beneath restlessness isn't something you find once and keep. It's something you return to again and again, each time you fall back into noise. But each return is easier, softer, truer. You start to realize that stillness isn't an escape from life. It's the pulse of life itself, steady and timeless beneath the ever-changing rhythm of your days. And so, the journey continues, not upward or outward, but inward, deeper into the quiet center that never moves. What you once called agitation now feels like an invitation, a whisper saying, come closer. Beneath every restless wave, stillness waits. Beneath every thought, awareness breathes. And beneath every heartbeat, the sanctuary calls you home. Every return to stillness is a homecoming. After descending into the quiet beneath restlessness, you begin to see how every agitation, every wave of emotion, was only calling you back to yourself. There is a moment, after the noise fades, where something soft and familiar rises, a feeling of belonging that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. This is the beginning of self-returning, the sanctuary you've searched for in every place but your own presence. Human life, for most of us, becomes a long journey away from home. From childhood, we're taught to look outward for meaning, to earn love through performance, to prove our worth through success, to measure ourselves through other people's eyes. Every compliment becomes a drop of water in a dry well. Every criticism becomes a storm. Over time, we start to live at a distance from ourselves, chasing reflection after reflection, until we forget what it feels like to simply exist without needing to be seen. But awareness has infinite patience. It waits, quietly, behind the noise of ambition and fear. It never leaves, even when we abandon it. And the moment we stop chasing validation, even for a breath, that awareness opens its arms. One mindful breath, just one, can begin the journey home. The breath is the oldest teacher in Buddhism. It is the bridge between body and mind, between the world outside and the stillness within. Every inhale draws you back into the present. Every exhale releases what you no longer need to hold. When you bring your attention fully to the breath, you are not just breathing, you are remembering. You are returning to the only place peace ever lived, here, now, within. This is the sanctuary of self-returning, the moment when you stop seeking permission to exist and start simply being. The breath becomes the path that leads you home every time you wander. You don't need to recite a mantra or light a candle. You only need to notice that you are alive, breathing, aware. Each breath is a statement of truth. I am here. Beneath the constant urge to prove, achieve, and fix, that simple truth is what the soul has been longing for. When you anchor yourself in breath, the need for external approval begins to fade. You start to understand that no one else can validate what already exists. You were never broken, only distracted from your wholeness. Modern life trains us to look outward. We measure our happiness through screens, through comparison, through the illusion of more. But the self you're trying to perfect through achievement has never been incomplete. The breath reminds you of this with every rise and fall of your chest. You begin to see that returning home doesn't mean isolation. It means alignment. It means living from the center rather than the edges. The practice of self-returning is simple, but not easy. The mind resists because it thrives on movement. Stillness threatens its control. When you try to focus on the breath, it will try to pull you into thoughts, plans, regrets, doubts. But this is part of the training. Every time you notice you've wandered and gently return to the breath, you're strengthening awareness. You're building the muscle of coming home. This gentle return, again and again, is the essence of Buddhist mindfulness. The breath becomes a compass that never lies. It points you back to presence without punishment. It doesn't matter how far you've drifted. The moment you notice, you are already home. When you begin to live this way, your relationship with yourself changes. You stop treating your body as a tool and start honoring it as a temple. You begin to sense how the breath carries wisdom the mind cannot touch. It shows you the natural rhythm of life, expansion and release, holding and letting go. You start to see that peace is not found in control, but in participation, in being one with the movement of life instead of fighting against it. The breath also teaches compassion. When you breathe consciously, you feel connected, not just to yourself, but to everything that breathes. The air you inhale was once inside trees, oceans, and countless beings before you. Each breath is shared life. To breathe mindfully is to participate in an ancient rhythm that includes all of existence. It's a reminder that you are never alone, even in solitude. Self-returning is not selfishness. It is self-truth. The world confuses the two. Selfishness takes from others to fill emptiness. Self-returning fills yourself so deeply that you overflow. When you are centered, you no longer seek love from desperation. You give it freely because you already are it. The breath teaches you to fill your own cup before offering it to the world. Over time, you start to see how every form of external validation was a substitute for presence. Approval is a transaction. It depends on conditions, but presence is unconditional. It doesn't need to prove anything. When you live anchored in awareness, your worth is no longer a question to be answered. It becomes a quiet fact. One of the most powerful insights in Buddhist psychology is that suffering arises from craving, the constant reaching for something outside yourself. Self-returning dissolves this craving at its root. When you are home within, you no longer chase peace, you express it. You no longer pursue happiness, you embody it. The world becomes a reflection of your inner stillness instead of a battlefield for validation. This return also transforms your relationships. When you no longer depend on others to define you, you begin to relate to them differently. Love becomes cleaner, freer. You don't demand that others complete you. You share completeness. Communication deepens because you're not speaking from insecurity, but from clarity. Every interaction becomes an extension of the peace within. There is also healing in this practice. Much of human pain comes from self-abandonment, from ignoring what we feel to meet expectations or fit into roles. Returning to the breath brings those neglected parts back into awareness. You begin to listen to your own heart with the same compassion you once reserved for others. You learn to sit with your feelings, to hold them like small children returning home after being lost. In that holding, the past begins to release its grip. The sanctuary of self-returning is not about perfection. You will wander, daily, sometimes hourly, but each time you notice and come back, the home within you becomes stronger, more alive. You start to realize that the beauty of this path lies not in never leaving, but in the tenderness of returning. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of mindfulness as remembering. It's not about controlling attention, but remembering your true nature. Awareness itself. Every breath becomes an act of remembering. The body inhales and you recall, I am alive. The body exhales and you let go of the false selves that the world demanded you be. The breath also teaches patience. It cannot be rushed or forced. It moves in its own rhythm, just as awareness does. Learning to follow the breath is learning to live in harmony with reality, not faster, not slower, but in tune. When you surrender to that rhythm, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a song you were always meant to hear. As your practice deepens, even the smallest moments become sacred. Drinking water becomes a ceremony. Sitting in silence becomes prayer. Every breath becomes a return to the monastery within, a reconnection to the witness, a reaffirmation of the refuge beneath restlessness. You begin to see that spirituality is not separate from daily life. It's in the act of being present wherever you are. When you live in self-returning, decisions become clearer. You no longer act from fear of missing out or from trying to please. You act from alignment. The breath anchors you in what is true right now, not what the mind imagines. It brings simplicity to complex moments, clarity without force. The more you return home to yourself, the less you are controlled by the noise of the world. External validation starts to lose its flavor. Compliments feel nice, but they don't define you. Criticism stings less because you know it doesn't touch your core. You start to live with quiet confidence, rooted not in performance, but in presence. Self-returning also reveals that peace is not passive. It has depth, strength, and direction. When you're centered, you can act decisively without aggression. You can set boundaries without guilt. you can speak truth without needing approval. Presence doesn't make you distant, it makes you grounded. And even when life feels heavy, when grief or uncertainty visits, the breath remains a loyal guide. It teaches that no pain lasts forever, that each inhale carries new life, and each exhale releases what is done. You start to sense the natural intelligence of existence. Everything comes and goes, yet awareness endures. This is the deepest form of trust, knowing that even in loss, you are still held within the sanctuary of being. Eventually, self-returning becomes less of a practice and more of a way of living. You begin to move through the world like someone carrying a hidden temple inside them. People feel calmer around you because you're anchored. Your presence becomes medicine, not through words, but through stillness. You embody peace without needing to preach it. And then you realize the most beautiful truth. You never really left. The self you were searching for has been breathing with you all along, patient, waiting for your attention to return. Each mindful breath was a reunion. Each moment of awareness, a homecoming. The sanctuary of self-returning is not somewhere you go. It's what you are. The more you rest there, the more life begins to unfold effortlessly. Work becomes service. Relationships become sacred. Silence becomes nourishment. You see now that you were never meant to live chasing approval or performing for love. You were meant to breathe, to feel, to awaken. The breath brings you back again and again until the concept of returning disappears. There is only being, whole, complete, aware. This is the peace that no one can give or take away, the sanctuary that travels with you into every conversation, every moment of stillness, every breath you take. The world will still call for your attention. But now, you know how to come home. You've walked through the monastery within. You've met the quiet witness. You've descended beneath restlessness. And now, through every mindful breath, you've come home to yourself. The search is no longer outward. It's inward, alive, breathing, and it never ends, because this sanctuary isn't a destination. It's the rhythm of your being, repeating softly through every breath. Return, return, return. When you finally learn to return to yourself through the breath, something profound happens. The noise of the outer world quiets, and in its place, you begin to notice another silence, one that feels both comforting and unsettling. It's the space of solitude, the vast stillness that remains when all distractions fade. Many people fear this space. They call it loneliness. But in truth, it is the doorway to sacred company, the presence of the self that never abandons you. Loneliness is one of the most misunderstood human experiences. It's not simply the absence of others, it's the absence of connection, not outwardly, but inwardly. You can be surrounded by people, loved by many, and still feel that hollow ache inside. That emptiness isn't a flaw, it's the soul's quiet signal that it's time to come home. Loneliness is not a punishment, it's a message. It tells you that you've been living too far from your own heart. Solitude, on the other hand, is the alchemy of loneliness. It's what happens when you stop running from that emptiness and start listening to it. Instead of filling it with noise, attention, or distraction, you let it open. You start to see that what you once called being alone is actually an invitation, a sacred meeting with yourself. The moment you stop resisting solitude, it transforms from emptiness into fullness. We live in a world that fears silence. We fill every gap with sound, every pause with scrolling, every quiet moment with stimulation. Yet, beneath all that noise lies the companionship we're secretly craving. Solitude strips away everything false, the performances, the masks, the need to be seen, until what's left is the one relationship that never ends, the one you have with your own awareness. There's a kind of companionship that no one else can offer, the companionship of being truly present with yourself. When you learn to rest in solitude, you begin to sense that awareness is never absent. It doesn't matter if the house is empty or the phone is silent. Awareness is still here, breathing with you, listening, alive. That is the sacred company the soul seeks. The quiet realization that you were never truly alone, only unaware of your own presence. The shift from loneliness to solitude begins with acceptance. Most people fight loneliness by reaching outward, seeking validation, filling time, distracting the heart. But awareness teaches a different approach. When you feel the ache of isolation, instead of running, you turn toward it. You breathe into it. You acknowledge its presence without judgment. You let it speak. Often, you'll find that loneliness isn't asking for more people. It's asking for your attention. It's asking you to stop abandoning yourself. When you begin to meet loneliness with awareness, it loses its sting. The energy that once felt painful starts to feel sacred. You start to see that this space, once feared, is actually rich. A field where wisdom begins to grow. It's in solitude that clarity arises, creativity flows, and healing begins. When you're no longer performing for the world, you can finally hear your own voice. Buddhist teachings often refer to the concept of noble silence. It's not the silence of absence, but of presence. It's the silence that holds everything, that listens without trying to fix. When you enter solitude with awareness, you step into noble silence. You stop trying to fill the void and start allowing it to teach you. You discover that silence isn't empty, it's full of insight. Every quiet moment becomes a teacher. This shift also changes your relationship with love. When you no longer fear solitude, you stop clinging to relationships out of need. You begin to love from freedom instead of fear of being alone. You realize that love is not ownership or escape. It's two whole beings sharing the fullness of their solitude. The best relationships are not between people who complete each other, but between those who are already complete within themselves. Self-connection doesn't mean isolation. It means you no longer depend on external conditions to feel whole. You start to see that solitude isn't a wall between you and others. It's the foundation that allows real connection to exist. When you know how to be with yourself, you can be fully present with others without losing your center. In solitude, the mind quiets enough for the heart to speak. You start hearing subtle truths that daily noise had buried. What really matters, what needs to be released, what kind of life aligns with your deepest values. You begin to feel the pulse of authenticity, not who you think you should be, but who you already are when nothing is performed. This awareness is transformative because it brings self-companionship. The part of you that once sought comfort in others begins to find comfort within. You learn to soothe yourself, to hold your pain with tenderness, to speak gently to your own mind. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you because you realize that presence itself is the rescuer. Awareness becomes your eternal friend. Spending time alone starts to feel different. The quiet no longer feels heavy. It begins to nourish you. You might find yourself craving moments of stillness, not because you're escaping life, but because you're reconnecting with its essence. Solitude becomes like sunlight through a window, gently illuminating what was always beautiful but unnoticed. From this space, creativity begins to bloom. Many of history's great thinkers, poets, and mystics discovered their deepest insights in solitude, not because they were special, but because they listened. Solitude gives birth to understanding. It connects you with intuition, the subtle knowing that doesn't come from analysis, but from silence. The mind solves problems. Awareness reveals truth. There's also a spiritual dimension to solitude. When you sit in silence long enough, you start to sense that awareness itself is not personal. It doesn't belong to you. It's the same awareness that has existed through all beings, the same consciousness that connects everything alive. What began as loneliness turns into communion, not with others, but with life itself. You realize that you are never truly separate from existence. You are an expression of it. Loneliness says, "I am a part." Solitude says, "I am a part." That single shift in perception changes everything. You stop feeling like a fragment, searching for completion, and start feeling like a wave resting in the ocean. Every breath becomes a reunion with something infinite and kind. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. The mind will resist solitude because it can't control silence. Thoughts will arise, memories, doubts, discomfort, trying to fill the space. But awareness knows how to hold them without drowning in them. Each time you sit with yourself and stay, you teach your nervous system that silence is safe. Over time, that safety turns into love. Eventually, solitude becomes sacred company. You begin to feel the warmth of your own presence, the gentle hum of life within you. You realize that even when no one is there, something is awareness itself. Quiet, vast, patient, sits with you like an old friend. It doesn't demand, it doesn't judge, it doesn't leave. That presence is your true companion. This realization heals the deep wounds of abandonment that so many carry. You start to understand that what you were seeking in others was never really about them. It was about wanting to feel seen. When you rest in awareness, you are fully seen. The watcher within you holds you with unconditional acceptance. You no longer beg for belonging because you've discovered it in the only place it ever truly existed, within. When solitude becomes sacred, life slows down in the most beautiful way. You start to notice things you used to overlook. The way light shifts through a room, the quiet rhythm of your heartbeat, the subtle beauty of breathing without effort. Each small moment becomes a reminder that presence itself is enough. And from this sacred stillness, gratitude arises naturally. You begin to feel grateful not just for pleasant experiences, but for existence itself. Even loneliness, once feared, becomes something to bow to, a teacher that led you home. You start to see that every difficult emotion carries wisdom when held in awareness. The very thing you resisted becomes the key to your freedom. This shift also transforms how you serve the world. When you've found peace in solitude, you stop seeking fulfillment through others, and you start sharing it. Your presence becomes a sanctuary for those still searching. You listen more deeply. You speak with more kindness. You no longer need to fix anyone because you understand that everyone's journey home begins within. You become comfortable with silence, in conversations, in relationships, in life. Silence no longer feels like emptiness, but like truth. You learn to rest in pauses without rushing to fill them. That patience creates deeper intimacy with everything, with yourself, with others, with existence itself. Even in moments of physical solitude, a quiet night, a walk alone, a morning without messages, you start to feel connected to something vast and alive. You sense that every breath connects you with the same air breathed by mountains, oceans, and stars. Solitude expands into unity. You stop feeling like a single point of consciousness and start feeling like consciousness itself, expressing through a human form. This is the heart of Buddhist practice, the realization that there was never separation to begin with. The pain of loneliness was only the mind's misunderstanding. Beneath it, solitude was always sacred. Awareness was always holding you, quietly waiting for you to notice. And now, you do notice. You feel it, that quiet companionship that never wavers, that presence that has watched every joy and sorrow without turning away. You begin to rest in it more often, to draw strength from it, to let it guide your life. It becomes your anchor, your peace, your truest friend. When solitude becomes sacred company, you no longer fear being alone because you understand that aloneness doesn't exist. There is only awareness, breathing itself through every form, loving through every heart, resting quietly in the space you once called me. And so, what began as loneliness becomes the greatest discovery, that you are never without company, because within you lives the eternal presence that has always been here, the silent companion that listens, watches, and loves without end. From here, life takes on a new simplicity. Relationships deepen, creativity blossoms, silence becomes healing, and every moment feels intimate. You've found the one friend who never leaves, your own awareness. And now you walk through the world not seeking connection, but radiating it. Solitude, once feared, becomes your sanctuary. It's no longer a pause between moments, but the foundation beneath them. The self you once abandoned has become the self you finally sit beside, in silence, in stillness, in peace. And as you rest there, you understand the quiet truth that all spiritual seekers eventually find. The greatest company you will ever keep is the one already breathing within you. When solitude becomes a sacred companion, a new kind of vision opens. You begin to notice that even when you are alone, life is not still. It moves, breathes, and unfolds in every direction. Yet, within all that movement, something remains perfectly steady. Beneath the motion of thoughts, the rise and fall of emotions, and the constant change of the world, there is a center that never wavers. This is what Buddhism calls the still point of the turning world, the unchanging heart of existence, where chaos and calm are not opposites but reflections of the same truth. At first glance, the world appears divided. There is peace and there is conflict, joy and pain, order and disorder. We label one as good and the other as bad, one as desired and the other as feared. Yet, this duality is only a surface perception. Beneath it, reality moves in harmony, like a dance that includes both the fast and the slow, the rise and the fall, without ever losing balance. The still point is not the absence of movement, but the place within movement, where everything is perfectly aligned. When you touch this center, you begin to understand that chaos and calm are not enemies. They are partners. Just as waves and the ocean are one, turmoil and tranquility arise from the same depth of being. Life is not divided into moments of peace and moments of storm. It is a single current, expressing itself in different rhythms. The art of awareness is learning to rest in that current without trying to stop it. The human mind craves control. It wants life to unfold according to plan, to remain predictable and stable. But the more we resist change, the more chaotic everything feels. The still point is not found through control, but through surrender. The surrender that allows you to see that even in disorder, something larger is holding it all together. The Buddha called this the middle way, the balance that exists between extremes. The middle way is not compromise, it is wisdom. It recognizes that stability is not found in stopping motion, but in realizing that motion itself arises within a vast, unmoving awareness. The planets spin, seasons change, thoughts appear and fade, but awareness remains untouched. That is the still point, the unmoved center in which all movement occurs. When you start to see life from this perspective, your relationship with chaos transforms. What once felt threatening begins to feel sacred. The ups and downs of existence become part of a larger intelligence, a rhythm that needs both expansion and contraction to sustain balance. You begin to see that even pain has purpose, that storms are part of the way life renews itself. Nothing is wasted, nothing is out of place. The chaos is not a flaw in the design, it is the design. This understanding doesn't come from thought, but from direct awareness. When you sit in silence and simply observe, you start to sense that stillness is not something you create. It is something you notice. It's already here, beneath every sound and every sensation. Even in the busiest moment, a layer of stillness is always present, a subtle hum that never ceases. You don't have to quiet the world to feel it. You only need to listen deeply enough. The mind, when left untrained, becomes hypnotized by movement. It chases thoughts the way a cat chases shadows, believing peace lies in catching the next one. But awareness doesn't chase. It stays still and watches. The moment you recognize yourself as awareness rather than thought, you are at the still point. From there, even chaos becomes graceful. You start to live with a steady pulse that no external event can disturb. This is why enlightened beings appear calm even amid crisis. Their peace is not because life is easy, it's because they rest in the truth that both ease and struggle are temporary expressions of the same reality. They don't cling to calm or resist chaos. They let both pass through awareness, like clouds across the open sky. The sky never fears the storm because it knows it will clear. Awareness never fears chaos because it knows it cannot be touched by it. In Buddhism, this understanding is often illustrated through nature. The river flows endlessly, yet the water within it is never the same. It moves, it changes, but the essence of river remains. The wind blows in every direction, yet the space it moves through never shifts. Awareness is that space, the silent expanse in which all experiences rise and fall without disturbing the totality. When you live from this understanding, balance stops being a fragile achievement and becomes a natural state. You no longer have to maintain calm by resisting the world's movement. Instead, you find peace in participation. You can be active, passionate, even intense, without losing your inner stillness. This is what the Zen masters mean when they say, "Move, but never be moved." Awareness doesn't prefer silence over noise or stillness over movement. It allows all forms equally. When you identify with this awareness, you begin to live with an open heart. You stop labeling experiences as blessings or curses. Every event becomes an expression of the same sacred energy, the energy of life itself. You see that both chaos and calm are just different notes in the same symphony. The music would lose its beauty if one were missing. This insight dissolves the old battle between control and surrender. You realize that control was never truly possible because the world was never separate from you. The chaos you feared was part of the same field of being that you are. You can now participate in life without trying to bend it to your will. You start to flow. In that flow, action becomes effortless, like a dancer who no longer thinks about the steps, but moves as the music moves. The still point is not a distant goal. It is here, in this very moment, behind your breath, beneath your heartbeat, inside every perception. Even when the mind races, something remains untouched. To find it, you don't need to stop your thoughts. You simply need to see that awareness is already here, watching the thoughts come and go. That recognition is the return to center. Living from this center means you no longer seek peace as a future event. You realize that peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of awareness within them. You can walk through noise without losing silence, through change without losing balance. You stop searching for stillness as a state and start living it as a truth. In moments of crisis, this realization becomes your greatest refuge. When everything around you falls apart, the still point remains. It holds you quietly, reminding you that the essence of who you are has never been touched by loss. Even grief, when seen from awareness, has a strange beauty. It shows how deeply you've loved, how alive your heart still is. You begin to see that nothing real is ever lost. It only changes form. The still point also reveals the nature of impermanence. You begin to sense that life's constant motion is not chaos, but order beyond understanding. Every ending makes space for beginning. Every loss creates room for renewal. You no longer cling to permanence because you see that the only permanent thing is change itself, and beneath even that, the stillness that allows change to happen. This perspective transforms fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty. But when you know that both chaos and calm belong to the same stillness, uncertainty loses its threat. You no longer need to predict or control life. You can meet it as it comes, trusting that awareness will remain steady no matter what arises. You stop trying to survive the storm and start learning to dance in the rain. The more deeply you rest in this awareness, the more compassionate you become. You realize that others too are caught in the turning world, pulled by joy and sorrow, fear and desire. When you meet people from your still point, you see their storms without judgment. You don't get swept into their chaos, yet you don't withdraw from it either. You become a steady presence, offering calm not by words, but by being. This is why the still point is called a refuge. It's not a place to hide, it's a foundation from which to engage the world more deeply. From here, you can act with clarity, speak with kindness, and move through uncertainty with trust. Your calm doesn't separate you from life. It allows you to embrace it fully, knowing that both serenity and turbulence serve the same whole. Meditation, when understood in this light, is not a method for escaping reality, but for aligning with it. It trains you to sense the stillness within movement, the silence within sound. When you sit quietly and let the world move around you, awareness begins to reveal its depth. You start to sense the infinite beneath the temporary, the timeless beneath the changing. The poet T.S. Eliot described it beautifully. At the still point of the turning world, there the dance is. This is not metaphor, it's the truth of existence. The world turns, the dance continues, but the center remains unmoved. When you live from that center, you are part of the dance without being lost in it. Every breath offers this lesson anew. The inhale expands, the exhale releases. Both movements arise from the same stillness. The breath doesn't choose between them. It completes both with grace. Awareness works the same way. It doesn't reject experience, it integrates it. The balance of life is not static, but dynamic, a harmony that includes every note. To rest in the still point is to trust life completely. You no longer divide the world into good and bad, success and failure. You begin to see that everything has its place in the great unfolding. The flower blooms and withers, both are sacred. The sun rises and sets, both are necessary. Even your own emotions, joy, grief, love, anger, all belong. Awareness doesn't discriminate. It holds everything in the same embrace. This realization brings a peace that cannot be broken because it's not built on avoidance, it's built on inclusion. You stop trying to escape the turning world and instead let it turn within you. You find rest not by leaving movement behind, but by finding the stillness that has always been moving with you. When this understanding settles deeply, even the word stillness becomes unnecessary. There's just life, unfolding in perfect balance, and awareness quietly witnessing. The world continues to spin, and yet, inside you, there is no spinning, only presence, vast and unwavering. This is the secret the Buddha discovered beneath the Bodhi tree, that within the impermanence of everything lies a stillness that never changes. It doesn't reject the world. It holds it. It doesn't need to end the dance. It simply sees that the dancer and the dance were never separate. And so, as you walk through the noise, the beauty, and the storms of life, remember this truth. The still point is always here, right where you are, beneath chaos, within calm, inside every heartbeat. The world will keep turning, but awareness remains unmoved, quietly shining through it all. In that realization, you find the peace that nothing can disturb, and the wisdom that nothing was ever out of place. When you begin to live from the still point, something begins to shift deep within you. You start to sense that even the identity you've worn, the name, the story, the face you present to the world, is part of that movement too. It's real in the same way a wave is real, visible for a while, yet inseparable from the ocean beneath it. The deeper you rest in stillness, the more you begin to wonder, who am I before the world tells me who to be? What remains when every label falls away? This question marks the beginning of another awakening, discovering the space between identities. Most of life is lived through definitions. From the moment you're born, the world begins naming you. Your gender, your family, your culture, your profession, your achievements. These words give structure to experience, but they also create invisible walls. Over time, you start to mistake the walls for the self. You forget that before you were a name, before you were a role, before you were anyone's anything, you simply were. Awareness, open and unconditioned. This forgetting is subtle. You don't notice when it happens. One day, you wake up and realize you've become a collection of titles: worker, parent, friend, success, failure. Each one carries expectations. Each one shapes how you act and speak. But beneath all these roles, something timeless watches. The same still awareness that was present before any identity began. That presence is what you truly are. The space between identities is the doorway back to that presence. It's not a physical place, but a state of being. The moment when you stop performing and simply rest in awareness. It's that pause between breaths, between thoughts, between one version of yourself and the next. It's where you can see clearly without being defined by what you see. In Buddhist philosophy, the self is seen as a process, not a permanent thing. The personality, the habits, the memories. They're like waves in the ocean of consciousness. They rise and fall, giving the illusion of continuity, but they never stay. When you look closely, you realize there is no fixed me, only the awareness in which all experiences appear and disappear. This isn't an abstract concept. It's something you can feel directly when you stop identifying with your story for even a moment. When you rest in awareness, the boundaries between you and the world begin to blur. You start to sense that the same consciousness looking through your eyes is the one animating everyone else. The separation that identity creates begins to dissolve. You realize that identity is useful. It helps navigate the world, but it's not the truth of who you are. It's a costume awareness wears to experience diversity. This understanding brings immense freedom. Once you see that you are not confined to a single identity, life stops feeling like a performance that must be perfected. You can move through different roles, professional, friend, parent, child, without losing your center. You start to live with fluidity instead of rigidity. You can fully engage with each role while knowing that none of them define you completely. But reaching this understanding requires courage, because identity often feels safe. It gives us a sense of control and belonging. To step into the space between identities means to let go of certainty, to stand in the unknown. At first, this can feel unsettling, like standing without ground. But the longer you stay in that space, the more you realize it's not emptiness, it's openness. It's not the loss of self. It's the discovery of the self that cannot be lost. Awareness doesn't need a title to exist. It doesn't ask, "Who am I?" because it already knows. It's everything and nothing at once. When you touch this truth, the pressure to be someone relaxes. You begin to experience a quiet joy in simply being. This joy doesn't depend on accomplishment or recognition. It comes from the direct experience of freedom, the freedom of not having to play a role. The space between identities also brings deep clarity. When you're not entangled in the roles you play, you can see them more clearly. You can recognize when you're acting from conditioning rather than truth. You can see how society's expectations shape your choices. And from that seeing, you gain the power to choose differently. Awareness gives you the distance to respond instead of react. In this space, even failure loses its sting. Because when you're not defined by your roles, failure doesn't touch your essence. You may lose a job, a relationship, or a title, but you don't lose yourself. You see that those were forms through which awareness expressed itself for a while. Now they've changed, as all forms do. You remain the witness, unshaken and whole. This realization also brings compassion. When you understand how identities shape perception, you stop taking others' behavior so personally. You see that they, too, are acting through layers of conditioning, trying to live up to names the world gave them. Instead of judging, you begin to empathize. You recognize the shared struggle, the human tendency to forget our true nature beneath all the masks. Every meditation, every mindful breath, is a practice in stepping into this space. When you watch your thoughts without attaching to them, you're training yourself to rest between identities. Each time you notice, "I'm angry," or "I'm sad," and then pause, you create distance. You realize that anger and sadness are passing states, not permanent selves. That pause, that awareness, is where your freedom lives. Over time, this awareness expands into daily life. You begin to see the gap between stimulus and response. Someone criticizes you, and instead of reacting, you feel the space before reaction. In that space, you realize you have a choice, not to act from identity, but from presence. This is what the Buddha meant by liberation, freedom not from the world, but from the automatic patterns that define you. Living from this awareness doesn't mean abandoning identity. It means wearing it lightly. You can use your name, your profession, your roles, but they no longer use you. You move through life like an actor aware of the stage, fully performing, yet never forgetting the truth behind the play. This balance brings serenity in chaos and humility in success. You see that identity is not the enemy. Clinging to it is. As you deepen in awareness, even the idea of self-improvement begins to shift. Instead of trying to become a better version of you, you begin to release the need to be any version at all. You focus on awareness itself, the silent witness that doesn't need fixing. Paradoxically, when you stop trying to improve the identity, your behavior naturally aligns with wisdom and kindness. Authenticity replaces performance. This space also reveals the illusion of time in personal identity. Most of what we call me is memory, a collection of past experiences, opinions, and roles. But when you rest in awareness, the past dissolves and the future loses its pull. There is only presence, and in presence, identity is fluid. You can shift, adapt, create anew without fear of contradiction. You realize that the truest you is not a story unfolding, it's the awareness watching the story. When you experience this directly, even suffering changes texture. Pain still happens, physical, emotional, situational, but it no longer defines you. Awareness witnesses it as part of the human experience, not as a personal failure. You start to meet pain with curiosity instead of resistance, asking, "What is this showing me?" That openness transforms suffering into insight. The space between identities is also where creativity is born. Every great idea, every breakthrough arises from stillness, from the pause between what was and what could be. When you stop clinging to who you think you are, you make space for something new to emerge. Inspiration flows through the emptiness that ego fears. True creativity is not the expression of identity, but the expression of awareness itself. This realization has practical implications too. It changes how you navigate challenges. When life demands a new version of you, awareness allows you to step into it gracefully. You stop fearing change because you understand that your essence doesn't change, only the form does. Whether you succeed or fail in a role, you know it's just one scene in the play of life. Awareness is the stage that remains. In relationships, this understanding brings depth and freedom. You stop expecting others to fulfill fixed roles, partner, friend, parent, guide, and start seeing them as awareness, expressing through different forms. You relate not to the label, but to the presence beneath it. This shift removes much of the pain of expectation. It allows love to breathe without control. Spiritual growth, then, is not about building a stronger identity, but dissolving the illusion of a separate one. You begin to sense that awareness has always been whole. It doesn't need completion. All practices, all paths, are just ways of remembering this wholeness. The space between identities is the doorway through which that remembering happens. And when you live from this understanding, the world itself changes. You start to see life not as a battlefield of competing selves, but as a single awareness playing many roles. Every person becomes a reflection of the same consciousness looking back at you. The boundaries that once felt solid begin to soften. Even the line between self and other starts to fade into unity. This is not the loss of individuality, it's the birth of authenticity. You become more real, not less. You speak and act from truth rather than from the mask of expectation. You begin to live with an effortless honesty, not trying to impress, defend, or pretend. You simply express what awareness moves through you in that moment. From this place, peace arises naturally. You're no longer torn between who you are and who you should be. You see that both are just thoughts. You start to rest in the silent awareness that holds them, that resting is liberation, not dramatic, not mystical, but profoundly simple. As you continue on this path, you might find moments where identity returns, where the mind says, "This is who I am," or "I must protect this image." But now, you notice it, you smile at it. You no longer believe the story completely. You've seen the space between the stories, the truth that needs no name. And that realization changes everything. You walk through life not as a fixed identity, but as living awareness. You can play any role, yet none of them can imprison you. You can experience joy and sorrow fully, yet neither defines you. You have discovered the sacred pause, the space before the world calls you anything, where you simply are. In that space, life is free again. Every moment becomes new. Every breath feels pure. You are no longer trapped in the narrative of becoming. You are resting in the truth of being. This is the essence of the unconditioned self, the quiet, luminous awareness that existed before the first name was spoken and will remain long after the last word fades. When you begin to see the space between identities, something profound unfolds. The need to cling to any version of yourself begins to soften, and awareness starts to flow freely through everything you experience. Yet, as this clarity deepens, life will still bring its share of pain. Grief, loss, heartbreak, fear. They do not disappear simply because you have seen through the illusion of self. But something changes in how you meet them. The pain that once felt like a punishment now starts to reveal its deeper purpose. Beneath every form of suffering, there is something sacred, a doorway that leads you back into presence. This is the sanctuary beneath suffering. Human beings spend most of their lives running from pain. We fear it, suppress it, distract ourselves from it. We build entire identities around avoiding what hurts. But the paradox of awareness is that what you resist grows stronger, and what you meet with compassion begins to dissolve. The Buddha never promised a life without suffering. He promised understanding of it, because when you understand suffering, it transforms from a wall that traps you into a path that frees you. Pain is not the enemy of peace, it's the messenger of awareness. It points you back to the places where you have forgotten your wholeness. Every ache, physical or emotional, carries wisdom. It tells you where you have been clinging, where you have been rejecting, where you have been believing a story that no longer serves you. If you can meet that pain with stillness instead of resistance, something extraordinary happens. The pain begins to lose its identity, and what remains beneath it is silence. That silence is not emptiness, it's presence. The same awareness you touched in stillness, in solitude, in the space beyond identity. The same consciousness that never moves, even as the world turns, also remains untouched beneath every wave of suffering. To discover that still point inside pain is one of the deepest realizations of the spiritual path. It shows you that peace was never the absence of struggle, it was the awareness that could hold it all. When suffering arises, most minds ask, "Why me?" or "How do I make this stop?" But awareness asks something different. What is this showing me? This question opens a new relationship with pain, one rooted in curiosity instead of avoidance. The moment you turn towards suffering rather than away, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming a witness of truth. Every emotion, no matter how heavy, carries energy that wants to move. Grief wants to be felt. Anger wants to be understood. Fear wants to be seen. When you allow these energies to flow through awareness, they begin to transform. Like ice melting in the sun, pain softens in the warmth of compassion. The more you fight it, the harder it becomes. The more you allow it, the more it dissolves into silence. In Buddhist psychology, this transformation is often called turning poison into medicine. The very thing that once caused suffering becomes the source of liberation. When you bring mindful attention to your pain, it becomes a teacher. It reveals where you've been asleep, where you've mistaken attachment for love or expectation for truth. It humbles you, purifies you, and opens the heart in ways comfort never could. This doesn't mean glorifying pain or seeking it out. It means understanding its purpose when it arrives. Life is not cruel for including suffering. It is complete because of it. Without contrast, awareness would have nothing to awaken from. Without shadow, light would have no depth. Pain exists not to punish, but to polish the soul until it shines with clarity. When you look deeply into any moment of suffering, you'll notice that what hurts most is not the experience itself, but your resistance to it. The mind says, "This shouldn't be happening." That thought creates separation, a split between reality and what you wish were true. Awareness heals that split by allowing what is. When you stop fighting life, suffering loses its fuel. The situation may remain the same, but your relationship with it transforms. The practice of observing suffering with compassion is one of the purest forms of meditation. You sit with your pain the way you would sit with a wounded friend, not trying to fix it, not trying to silence it, just being there. That presence alone begins to heal. When the mind is still, the heart begins to open, and in that opening, even sorrow becomes sacred. There's a quiet power in realizing that pain doesn't destroy presence. It reveals it. Think about the times you've been cracked open by life, the loss of someone you love, a betrayal, an illness, an ending. In those moments, the noise of the ego often falls silent. You may cry, you may break, but underneath the breaking, something vast and aware remains. You feel raw, yes, but also strangely awake. That's because suffering, when fully entered, dissolves the boundaries of the false self. It strips away illusion until only truth remains. This is why the spiritual path doesn't promise comfort, it promises awakening. The more you open to pain, the more real you become. Not in the sense of adding something new, but in shedding what was false. Pain refines awareness, the way fire refines gold. It burns away everything you are not. This process cannot be rushed. It's not about forcing yourself to be calm while hurting. It's about meeting the hurt honestly, staying with it, breathing with it. Awareness doesn't demand perfection. It invites presence. The more gently you meet pain, the faster it transforms. Harshness tightens it. Compassion loosens it. The key is tenderness, the willingness to hold your suffering like a mother holds a crying child, not with impatience, but with love. When you learn to do this, your understanding of compassion expands beyond yourself. You begin to recognize the suffering of others not as something separate, but as part of the shared human experience. The moment you stop running from your own pain, you stop judging others for theirs. Compassion is no longer an idea, it becomes a living force. You start to see that every person you meet carries invisible battles, just like you. That realization softens you in the most human way. In this way, suffering becomes the bridge that connects hearts. It reminds us of our shared fragility, our shared longing for peace. It strips away the illusion of difference. Underneath our stories, we all experience loss, fear, and hope in the same language. When you can sit with your own suffering in stillness, you naturally create space for others to be seen in theirs. You become a sanctuary, a quiet presence where others feel safe to fall apart and remember their own stillness. The sanctuary beneath suffering isn't hidden in some distant spiritual state. It's right here, in the middle of your most painful experiences. The more deeply you allow yourself to feel, the closer you come to truth. Pain opens doors that comfort keeps closed. It humbles the ego, reveals impermanence, and shows you the strength of awareness that never leaves. When you reach that depth, silence begins to speak. It doesn't offer answers, it offers peace. You start to hear life itself whispering through the stillness. This, too, belongs. That whisper is the sound of surrender, the moment you stop fighting the river and begin to flow with it. You'll notice that when pain dissolves into silence, what remains is love. Not sentimental love, but unconditional acceptance, the kind that sees beauty even in brokenness. Awareness begins to embrace everything it once rejected. You realize that the same presence that holds joy also holds sorrow, equally and completely. This is the true sanctuary, not freedom from pain, but freedom within it. When suffering is met with awareness, even the darkest experiences gain meaning. You begin to see that pain refines perception. It makes you more compassionate, more grounded, more awake. The same heart that once feared breaking becomes capable of holding the world. Suffering teaches you the art of surrender, how to trust life even when you don't understand it. This understanding also transforms how you view healing. Healing is not the erasure of pain, it's the integration of it. It's the moment you realize that what hurt you has also shaped your depth, your patience, your empathy. You no longer seek to return to who you were before the wound. You begin to honor who you've become through it. Pain, when held in awareness, becomes the sculptor of wisdom. Buddhist teachers often speak of no mud, no lotus. The lotus, one of the most sacred symbols of awakening, blooms only in muddy water. The mud is not a mistake. It's the condition for the flower's growth. The same is true for human consciousness. Without pain, awareness would remain shallow. It is through struggle that the soul deepens, through heartbreak that love becomes unconditional, through impermanence that we learn to appreciate the present. Eventually, this insight becomes embodied. You stop asking for a life without storms and start seeking the stillness that remains during them. You stop seeing suffering as punishment and start recognizing it as purification. You no longer measure peace by how calm life looks, but by how present you remain when it isn't. And so, the next time pain visits, you don't push it away. You meet it gently. You breathe with it. You ask, "What truth are you trying to show me?" In that moment, awareness becomes the healer. It doesn't fix the pain. It reveals what is beyond it. As suffering unfolds in awareness, you begin to see that it never truly belonged to you. It was never personal. It was part of life, moving through form, an experience meant to awaken compassion and dissolve separation. The moment you stop identifying with it, The moment you rest as the witness, pain transforms into pure presence. And from that presence, silence arises, deep, luminous, and unbreakable. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of completion. The kind of peace that doesn't need to say anything, because it already holds everything. This is the sanctuary beneath suffering, the place where pain dissolves into awareness, where tears turn into wisdom, and where every wound becomes a window to stillness. It's not found by escaping the human experience, but by entering it fully, with open eyes and a soft heart. The stillness you've been seeking was never beyond suffering. It was always within it, waiting to be felt. And when you touch it, you understand the quiet truth that the Buddha saw under the Bodhi tree. That suffering, when seen clearly, is not the opposite of peace. It is the path to it. When you begin to see the sanctuary beneath suffering, your relationship with pain changes completely. You stop running from it, and instead you allow it to show you the truth. You start to notice that awareness itself has a quality that pain cannot touch. Clarity. It's as though the deeper you allow yourself to feel, the clearer you become. The tears wash away illusion, the struggle polishes perception, and what remains is a mind so still it begins to reflect life as it really is. This is the birth of what the ancient masters called the mind's moonlight, a consciousness clear enough to mirror reality without distortion. Most of us live with a mind like restless water, stirred by desire, fear, and judgment. Thoughts ripple constantly, and the world we see becomes a reflection of those disturbances. When you look through anger, the world seems hostile. When you look through craving, the world appears incomplete. The mind does not just observe reality, it colors it. Yet beneath the turbulence lies a deeper layer, consciousness itself, naturally still, naturally luminous, like a lake on a windless night, reflecting the moon in perfect silence. The practice of cultivating this clarity is not about controlling thought or suppressing emotion. It's about allowing awareness to settle until it becomes transparent again. When you stop clinging to what arises and stop rejecting what you dislike, the surface begins to smooth itself. You don't need to polish the mind, you only need to stop muddying it. Just as water clears when left undisturbed, consciousness returns to its pure nature when not interfered with. This clarity reveals something extraordinary, that reality itself is never distorted, only your perception of it. Life is what it is, a flow of experiences, sensations, and changes. The distortion comes when you add resistance, judgment, or preference. The more you grasp or push away, the less you see clearly. But when the mind becomes still, life reflects itself just as it is, and in that direct seeing, wisdom arises naturally. In Buddhist teachings, this state of clarity is often described as the mirror-like mind. The mirror doesn't choose what to reflect. It simply reflects. It doesn't say, "I'll show this, but not that." It accepts light and shadow equally, and because it resists nothing, it distorts nothing. This is the essence of mindfulness, not choosing your experience, but witnessing it as it is. When your awareness reaches this state, you begin to notice subtleties that were once invisible. You see how your emotions form and dissolve, how thoughts appear and vanish, how every perception is transient. This insight softens attachment. You no longer take every feeling as final or every opinion as truth. You start to live in harmony with impermanence, seeing that the only thing constant is awareness itself. The moonlight metaphor in Buddhist thought carries deep meaning. The moon doesn't generate its own light, it reflects the sun's. Similarly, the awakened mind doesn't create truth, it reflects reality. It doesn't impose interpretation, but allows truth to shine through it. And just as the moon can be hidden by clouds, clarity can be obscured by thought. Yet the light itself never disappears, it only waits for the mind to clear. Cultivating this kind of consciousness requires gentle attention. Harsh control only stirs the water more. You learn to observe your mind like a patient gardener watching the weather, not trying to stop the wind, but knowing that the storm will pass. You notice when agitation appears and simply acknowledge it. Restlessness is here. You notice when peace appears and do the same. Peace is here. In doing so, you stop identifying with the waves and start recognizing yourself as the water. A still mind is not an empty one. It's fully alive, alert, and deeply sensitive. It perceives without interference, like a finely tuned instrument. When you rest in that clarity, you see beauty in things you once overlooked. The way sunlight moves through leaves, the softness in a stranger's voice, the quiet intelligence in every detail of life. Awareness becomes luminous, and everything it touches seems to shine with it. This clarity also brings wisdom to how you relate to others. When your mind is clouded by judgment, you react to people based on memory, fear, or projection. But when awareness is still, you see them as they are in that moment, not as your past defines them. You begin to listen deeply, not to respond, but to understand. This kind of listening heals relationships because it allows others to be seen without distortion. You start to notice how much suffering in the world comes from misunderstanding, from people reacting not to truth, but to their version of it. A clear mind cuts through that confusion. It doesn't get trapped in opinions or the drama of right and wrong. It moves with compassion because it sees the roots of ignorance without condemnation. To see clearly is to forgive naturally, because you understand that confusion, not malice, drives most human pain. The moonlight mind also changes how you relate to yourself. You begin to notice how often your own thoughts create inner conflict. The stories of not being enough, the self-criticism, the endless striving. When awareness becomes still, those voices lose their authority. You see them as passing clouds, not permanent truths. The harsh inner dialogue that once defined you becomes background noise in a vast space of stillness. And from that stillness, kindness arises, not forced, but effortless. This is the power of reflection without distortion. It doesn't mean life stops challenging you, it means your perception of those challenges becomes balanced. You no longer see events as good or bad, only as experiences unfolding. That neutrality is not coldness, it's freedom. You start to respond from clarity instead of reacting from fear. Decisions come more easily, actions become aligned, and peace remains unbroken even in difficulty. Meditation becomes the training ground for this clarity. When you sit quietly and observe the movement of thought, you start to see its patterns. You see how attention clings to certain ideas and avoids others. You notice how emotion colors perception, turning neutral events into stories. Each observation brings you closer to stillness. You stop being a prisoner of thought and become the observer of thought. That shift, from being inside the storm to watching it, is the beginning of freedom. Over time, the boundary between meditation and life begins to dissolve. You carry the same clarity into ordinary moments: walking, speaking, eating. Awareness becomes continuous. You notice how thoughts ripple through your day, but now they don't carry you away. You can feel anger without being angry, experience sadness without becoming sad. The emotion moves through, leaving the mind clear again, like rain passing over a mirror that still reflects the moon. This kind of presence has a quiet power. It doesn't need to control outcomes or fix others. It influences simply by being. People sense it, the calm, the clarity, the non-reactivity, and it invites them to rest too. The moon doesn't shout its light across the sky. It simply shines, and everything becomes visible. Your awareness works the same way. The clearer it becomes, the more peace it brings into the spaces around you. A mind like still water doesn't deny reality. It reflects it completely. It doesn't cling to pleasure or resist pain. It welcomes both, knowing that neither defines the whole. When you reach this understanding, you stop dividing life into categories. You no longer chase happiness as something separate from awareness, because you see that awareness itself is happiness, not the excitement of gain, but the serenity of presence. This state is not a withdrawal from life, it's a deeper participation in it. When you see clearly, you act with precision. Compassion becomes more effective because it's no longer reactive. You help not out of guilt, but out of understanding. Your actions align with truth, not emotion. You begin to live from balance, where stillness and movement are one seamless expression. This clarity also reveals the truth about desire. You begin to see that desire itself is not the problem. Attachment is. Desire arises naturally. It's life's way of evolving. But when desire becomes distorted by craving, it leads to suffering. A clear mind desires without clinging. It moves toward what feels right and releases what has passed. This is how awareness expresses freedom, even while engaged in the world. The moonlight mind doesn't judge. It simply reflects. It doesn't belong to the past or the future. It's the silent awareness that experiences everything while being untouched by anything. It's the consciousness that notices thought, but is not thought, that feels emotion, but is not emotion. When you begin to live from this awareness, life feels lighter, simpler, more honest. And yet, clarity is not something you keep. It's something you return to again and again. The world will keep stirring the surface. News, noise, relationships, change. But every time you notice the disturbance, that noticing itself is clarity. Awareness is self-correcting. It always knows how to return to stillness once you stop interfering. Eventually, this reflection becomes your natural state. You see the world clearly, but you also see through it, not with detachment, but with depth. You sense the impermanence behind form, the silence behind sound, the truth behind appearances. This is what it means to live as consciousness, fully engaged with life, yet free from distortion. When the mind reflects reality without clinging or rejection, every moment becomes luminous. You start to see the same awareness shining through everything: people, nature, even challenges. The boundaries that once divided your perception dissolve. There is only one vast field of awareness, quietly reflecting itself through infinite forms. And that realization brings the deepest peace, not the peace of escape, but the peace of clarity. You no longer need life to match your expectations because you finally see it as it is. The moon still shines, the water still reflects, and awareness remains unchanged, eternal and clear. That is the mind's moonlight. Consciousness so still it mirrors life perfectly. No distortion, no resistance, only the soft glow of understanding spreading quietly across the surface of being. When the mind begins to reflect reality clearly, something beautiful starts to unfold. The chasing slows down. The craving to change, to fix, to reach somewhere else begins to fade. In the light of clarity, you start to see how much of your suffering came from the quiet belief that the present moment was never enough. Always missing something, always waiting for something more. But when awareness becomes still and luminous, you begin to notice that peace was never in the next thing. It was here all along. This realization leads to one of the most profound insights in Buddhist practice: the refuge of enough. Enoughness is not resignation. It's not giving up on growth or settling for less. It's the recognition that peace doesn't begin when you get everything you want. It begins when you stop believing you're missing something essential. It's the gentle awakening to the truth that this moment, with all its imperfections, its unfinished stories, its quiet ordinariness, is complete in itself. When you rest in that recognition, you discover a freedom deeper than achievement, a joy untouched by comparison. For most of life, the mind is trained to measure. From childhood, you are told to be more, smarter, stronger, richer, kinder, wiser. Even spirituality can become another form of striving. The race to be enlightened, the pressure to be calm, the endless search for progress. But the more you chase, the farther peace seems to move. The mind that seeks is the same mind that says, "Not yet." Enoughness begins the moment you stop running. The sense of not enough is deeply woven into human conditioning. It's the whisper that fuels ambition, envy, and exhaustion. It hides beneath everyday thoughts. I should be further along. They're happier than me. I'll rest when I get there. Yet the truth is, there never arrives. The goalpost keeps moving because the mind is addicted to becoming. It fears stopping because in stillness it would have to face its own emptiness. But that emptiness, when seen clearly, is not lack. It's space, presence, possibility. It's life unfiltered. The refuge of enough is the discovery that you don't have to earn the right to rest. You don't have to wait until every problem is solved to feel whole. Wholeness is your natural state. When you stop measuring, when you drop the endless comparison, you realize you already belong. Every breath, every heartbeat, every small detail of your life is evidence of that belonging. Contentment is not born from having everything. It's born from knowing you need nothing to be at peace. This is what the Buddha meant by the middle way, not indulgence, not deprivation, but balance. The middle way recognizes that desire and aversion are two sides of the same illusion. When you rest in awareness, both dissolve, and what remains is quiet satisfaction, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes. In this still awareness, gratitude begins to bloom naturally. Gratitude is the language of enough. It doesn't come from effort or habit. It comes from seeing clearly. When you stop chasing the extraordinary, the ordinary becomes luminous. Drinking water feels like grace. A simple meal feels sacred. Even silence feels full. The mind that once dismissed these things as background begins to bow to their presence. Enoughness also heals the wound of comparison. The moment you stop looking sideways, life begins to expand vertically, deeper, not broader. You stop measuring your path against someone else's, because you understand that awareness expresses itself differently through every form. The tree doesn't compete with the river. The moon doesn't compare its light to the stars. Each fulfills its nature simply by being what it is. You, too, are part of that harmony. When you rest in enough, time loses its grip. The mind that's always racing into tomorrow starts to soften into now. The past no longer defines you. The future no longer haunts you. You realize that the present moment, this breath, this sensation, this awareness, is the only reality that has ever existed. Everything else is thought. And when you live from this truth, even small moments become infinite. Enoughness doesn't mean you stop dreaming or creating. It simply means you stop believing your worth depends on the result. You can act from inspiration rather than lack. You can build, create, serve, and love, not to complete yourself, but to express the completeness that's already there. This is how the mind's clarity becomes compassion in motion. You give not because you must, but because you can. This realization also transforms ambition. You no longer chase success to escape yourself. You engage with life as an act of play. Work becomes lighter. Effort feels effortless. You stop overreaching and start flowing. The line between doing and being dissolves. You discover that peace and purpose were never opposites. They are the same energy moving through awareness when it stops resisting. The refuge of enough also dissolves shame. So much of human pain comes from the belief that you are not measuring up to others, to expectations, to some imagined version of yourself. But when you rest in awareness, you see that those standards were illusions created by thought. The universe never asked you to be perfect. It only asked you to be here. When you truly grasp this, the weight of self-judgment begins to lift. You start to forgive yourself, not as an act of moral effort, but as a natural expression of understanding. Enoughness invites softness into every part of life. It turns ordinary actions into rituals of peace. Eating becomes mindful nourishment rather than distraction. Walking becomes meditation, even waiting. In traffic, in uncertainty, in transition, becomes a practice of patience. You start to live with a gentle rhythm, unhurried but fully alive. This awareness brings a new kind of confidence, quiet, grounded, free from performance. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You know that your value doesn't depend on accomplishment or validation. You start to act from wholeness rather than for it. The voice inside that once said, "You must," transforms into one that whispers, "You may." The refuge of enough also changes your relationship with pleasure. You begin to enjoy things more deeply because you no longer consume them to fill a void. You savor rather than grasp. The taste of food, the sound of laughter, the warmth of sunlight, they no longer serve as distractions, but as reflections of life's abundance. You stop seeking intensity and start feeling intimacy with the moment. As you practice resting in enough, your nervous system begins to heal. Constant striving keeps the body in subtle tension, always leaning forward, always reaching. When you learn to rest in presence, that tension releases, the breath deepens, the body softens. You realize that rest is not a reward for productivity, it's a return to your natural rhythm. In the clarity of enoughness, relationships transform too. You stop needing others to complete you, and this frees both sides. Love becomes lighter, freer. You no longer seek to possess or to be possessed. You connect from authenticity rather than insecurity. You stop demanding perfection and start appreciating presence. Every interaction becomes an exchange of being, not of need. From this peace, generosity flows effortlessly. When you know you have enough, giving feels natural. You don't give to earn virtue, you give because there is no sense of lack. Even a smile becomes an offering. The energy of abundance replaces the energy of scarcity. This is how personal peace becomes collective harmony. Enoughness also transforms your relationship with death and loss. The fear of not having enough time, love, or achievement fades when you realize that presence itself is timeless. You begin to live fully in each moment, not because you fear endings, but because you see that nothing real can ever be lost. Awareness, the core of what you are, remains whole regardless of what changes. This understanding brings simplicity to your life. You stop overcomplicating decisions and chasing endless options. You start valuing depth over quantity, essence over excess. Minimalism stops being an aesthetic and becomes an attitude. Not how little you own, but how fully you appreciate what you have. In Buddhism, the sense of enough is closely tied to the concept of santuti, or contentment. It's said that a content heart is the greatest wealth, because when you feel complete, even small blessings feel abundant. When you lack contentment, even great fortune feels empty. This truth is not moral, it's experiential. Contentment doesn't come from renunciation, but from recognition. The recognition that peace has always been within reach because it has always been within you. When awareness ripens into enoughness, even desire transforms. You stop wanting to escape the human experience and begin to cherish it. You stop waiting for life to improve and start living the improvement right now. You realize that enlightenment is not a distant summit, but the simple act of being fully present with what is. This understanding dissolves the illusion of achievement as the path to fulfillment. You see that every goal, once reached, only reveals the same truth. Nothing external can complete what is already whole. The only real arrival is now. The only destination is presence. And in that presence, life feels lighter. You no longer fear missing out because you know nothing essential can be missed. You no longer rush toward the future because you realize the present is infinite. You start to walk slower, breathe deeper, speak softer. You live in rhythm with the natural pulse of existence, neither ahead nor behind. The refuge of enough is the soft ground beneath all striving. It's where every search ends and every journey begins. It's not about retreating from life, but meeting it with open eyes and an open heart. It's not about having less or more. It's about realizing that nothing can add or subtract from what you already are. When you rest in this awareness, gratitude becomes your natural state. Every breath feels like a blessing. Every ordinary moment feels divine. You begin to live not from scarcity, but from sufficiency. A quiet knowing that whatever this moment holds, it is enough. And as you continue walking this path, you begin to see that enoughness is not static. It's alive. It breathes with you, evolves with you, guides you back whenever you forget. It becomes your anchor, your teacher, your refuge. The truth is simple. Peace was never waiting in the distance. It has been here all along, resting quietly beneath your striving, whispering softly through every breath. This is enough. You are enough. When you begin to rest in the refuge of enough, life becomes quieter. The mind loosens its grip on wanting, and in that loosening, a deeper kind of awareness begins to surface. One that doesn't chase after sensations, but listens to what holds them all. Beneath every sound, every thought, every moment of life unfolding, there is something constant: silence. It's not the silence of absence, but the silence that gives birth to everything you hear and feel. The practice now is learning to listen to that silence, to train your awareness to recognize the background that never disappears, even when the world is loud. Silence is not the opposite of sound. It is its foundation. Every word, every note, every heartbeat arises from silence and dissolves back into it. Just as waves rise from the ocean, sound arises from silence. Yet most people only hear the wave, not the water. We are so used to being pulled into the noise, the conversations, the notifications, the internal chatter, that we forget the quiet presence holding it all. But if you pay attention, even for a moment, you can sense it. The stillness behind everything that moves. That stillness is awareness itself. Listening to silence doesn't mean shutting out the world. It's not about forcing the mind into emptiness. It's about expanding your attention until you can hold both sound and the absence of sound at once. When you do that, you begin to realize that silence is never truly gone. Even in the busiest places, beneath the hum of life, silence remains, like a vast sky beneath passing clouds. In meditation, this awareness can become vivid. As you sit and listen, you start to notice the subtle contrast between noise and stillness. You might hear the sound of your breath, the faint rustle of movement, the distant echo of life. And then, between those sounds, there's a pause, a quiet space that seems infinite. That space is not just a gap between moments. It's the ground of consciousness itself. Every sound, thought, or sensation arises within that silence and falls back into it, yet the silence remains unchanged. The more you train yourself to listen, the more profound this realization becomes. You start to recognize silence not as emptiness, but as presence, a living awareness that holds everything. It's the same stillness that you touched in the refuge of enough, but now it's felt more deeply, as something that has always been here. You begin to see that silence is not something you create, it's something you remember. It has been waiting for your attention beneath the noise of the mind. This awareness transforms how you relate to sound itself. Instead of being overwhelmed by noise, you begin to hear it differently, as part of a greater whole. The ticking clock, the rhythm of footsteps, the voice of another person, they all arise from silence and return to it. Nothing disturbs the silence. It simply receives everything without resistance. That is why, in deep awareness, even chaos sounds harmonious. You start to sense that the world is not divided into peaceful and noisy moments. It's one continuous dance of sound and silence. Listening to silence also reveals something essential about your own mind. Just as the world has a background of stillness, your consciousness has a background of awareness that remains unchanged no matter what thoughts arise. Thoughts are like sounds, temporary, fleeting, constantly appearing and disappearing. But the awareness that hears them is eternal. The moment you begin to notice the space between thoughts, you start to experience the same peace that exists between sounds. This is what meditation masters mean when they speak of the gap. In that gap, between one thought and the next, you can feel the essence of being, pure, undivided, silent. The more familiar you become with that gap, the more natural it feels to rest there. You realize that you don't need to silence the mind. You only need to notice the silence that is already there, quietly holding the mind's movements. Silence has a quality that words can never capture. It's not dull or lifeless. It's alive with awareness. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply waits. When you finally start to listen, it reveals everything you've been searching for: peace, clarity, belonging. Because in silence, there is no division. You're no longer separate from what you experience. You are part of the same stillness that gives rise to all existence. This kind of listening changes how you live. You stop reacting so quickly to life's noise. You become more spacious inside, more grounded. Someone might speak to you harshly, and instead of responding from the surface of emotion, you hear the silence beneath their words, the pain, the longing, the confusion that gave birth to their tone. This awareness turns defensiveness into understanding. You begin to listen not just with your ears, but with your whole being. The practice of listening to silence is also a training in humility. It reminds you that the world doesn't need your constant commentary. You start to appreciate the power of pauses, in speech, in thought, in action. You realize that wisdom often enters through the spaces you once rushed to fill. The best decisions, the deepest insights, the truest love, they all arise in silence, not in noise. This silence is also the essence of compassion. When you listen deeply to another person, you offer them the same space that silence offers sound, a space where nothing is judged or interrupted. In that space, healing happens naturally. People don't always need advice. They need presence. Silence, when shared consciously, becomes love made audible through stillness. Listening to silence also changes how you perceive beauty. You start to sense it, not just in art, nature, or music, but in the quiet moments between them, the pause before a note, the breath before a word, the stillness before dawn. You begin to feel that beauty is not a quality of things, but of awareness itself. The more silent you become within, the more beauty the world reveals without. In deep meditation, this awareness expands until it becomes continuous. Even when sound returns, you still feel the silence underneath it, like a steady rhythm behind every experience. You begin to realize that silence and sound are not opposites, but partners in the same symphony. Awareness is the conductor. It allows each note to arise, play its part, and fade back into stillness. When you carry this awareness into daily life, even ordinary moments feel sacred. The sound of footsteps, the hum of traffic, the whisper of wind, they no longer disturb your peace. They express it. You start to experience what the Zen masters describe as the sound of one hand clapping, the recognition that sound and silence are not two. Everything you hear becomes a reminder of the silence that holds it. This practice also reveals the nature of impermanence in a tender way. Every sound, no matter how beautiful, ends. Every word, every song, every laugh, they all fade back into silence. Instead of feeling loss, you start to feel appreciation. The fleeting nature of sound becomes a lesson in presence. You begin to see that every moment of life is like a note in an infinite melody, precious because it will never come again. Silence also teaches patience. The modern world conditions us to react instantly, to respond, to fix, to comment. But silence invites you to wait. It teaches you that clarity arises not from speed, but from stillness. In the quiet, you begin to see what truly matters. You start to discern between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom. Silence doesn't just calm the mind, it refines perception. As you become intimate with silence, fear of solitude disappears. You no longer feel the need to fill every empty moment. In fact, you begin to crave the stillness that once frightened you. You realize that silence is not loneliness. It's companionship with presence. It's the self meeting itself beyond words. The heart, long burdened by noise, begins to rest. The more deeply you listen, the more you realize that silence is not external. It's not just the absence of sound around you, it's the quiet awareness within you. Even when your environment is loud, you can rest in that inner stillness. You can be in a crowded place and still feel vast, untouched, unshaken. The noise becomes like ripples on the surface of an ocean that remains still beneath. This understanding transforms meditation from a practice into a way of being. You stop trying to find peace and start recognizing that peace is the nature of silence itself. Every breath becomes a reminder of that truth. The inhale carries sound. The exhale returns to silence. The body moves, but awareness remains unmoved. As your sensitivity deepens, you start to sense that silence itself is aware. It's not passive, it's listening back. The silence isn't something you hear, it's something that hears you. This is one of the most profound discoveries on the path, that awareness and silence are one and the same. When you rest in that realization, the boundary between listener and sound, self and world, disappears. There is only listening, life listening to itself through you. In this realization, peace becomes unshakable. You no longer depend on external quiet to feel stillness. You could be in the middle of the world's noise and still feel the deep silence of being. That silence is the sanctuary that never disappears. It was there before you were born. It will remain long after every sound fades. It is the eternal witness, the ground of existence itself. When you live with awareness of that silence, every moment becomes meditation. You don't have to retreat from the world. You simply listen more deeply to it. Even conversation becomes a rhythm of silence and sound, speaking and pausing, giving and receiving. You learn to let silence speak for you when words would only divide. Eventually, you realize that this silence is love in its purest form, unconditional, vast, and always present. It doesn't judge, doesn't grasp, doesn't end. It holds everything you have ever been and everything you will ever become. And in that holding, you find peace beyond understanding. The world will continue to speak, to move, to make noise. But now you know where to listen, not to the noise itself, but to the silence that carries it. In that awareness, life becomes music, and every note, even the dissonant ones, points you back to the infinite stillness from which it came. This is the gift of listening to silence, the realization that peace was never the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness beneath it. Once you've heard that silence, truly heard it, you never forget it. It becomes your constant companion, your invisible refuge, and the quiet proof that no matter how much the world changes, something within you has always been still, vast, and awake. When you begin to listen deeply to the silence that holds all sounds, a quiet revelation unfolds. You realize how rare that silence has become in the modern world. You see how easily life drowns in motion, how the collective heart races faster every day without ever knowing why. Everywhere you look, there is noise, not just in streets and screens, but in the restless hum of human minds trying to keep up with an invisible pace. In this world that glorifies productivity and movement, stillness becomes not weakness, but rebellion. To be inwardly still is to step out of a trance that most have forgotten they're in. This is the quiet heroism of stillness. A courage so subtle it's often unseen, yet so powerful it can change the rhythm of your entire life. Stillness, in this sense, is not about doing nothing. It's about doing everything from a place that is not frantic. It's the strength to pause when everyone else rushes, to listen when everyone else speaks, to wait when the world demands reaction. Inward stillness is not withdrawal, it's mastery, the ability to move without losing your center. The true challenge is not to keep up with the world, but to remain whole within it. Modern culture celebrates movement as progress. Constant activity has become a measure of worth. We are told that to slow down is to fall behind. But awareness reveals the opposite. Movement without consciousness is not progress, it's repetition. The wheel keeps spinning, but it goes nowhere. Stillness breaks that cycle. It allows you to see the pattern, to step out of the momentum of habit and into deliberate being. It takes courage to stop when everyone else keeps moving. The mind resists it because it equates stillness with failure or stagnation. It whispers, if you stop, you'll lose everything you've built. Yet when you do stop, truly stop, you begin to see that most of what you were chasing was smoke. Stillness doesn't make you lose your life. It gives it back to you. It brings you home to what matters, to the presence you abandoned in the pursuit of more. The heroism of stillness lies in the decision to be awake in a culture that numbs itself with speed. Every advertisement, every screen, every conversation tells you to go faster, to achieve, to consume, to prove. Stillness refuses that invitation. It says, no. It chooses awareness over approval. It doesn't run from emptiness. It sits inside it until it becomes full. That act, simple, silent, invisible, is one of the most radical things a person can do today. In Buddhist thought, the mind that cannot rest is called the monkey mind, always jumping, never settling, always reaching for the next branch of distraction. The practice of stillness is the taming of that mind, not through force, but through understanding. When you sit quietly, you start to see how restless your inner world is. The discomfort that rises is not a failure, it's a mirror. It shows you how much of your movement was simply avoidance. Stillness reveals the hidden turbulence beneath activity. The hero's journey of stillness begins here, not with grand gestures, but with honest awareness. It starts when you decide to face yourself without distraction. That first moment of silence can feel unbearable because it exposes everything you've been outrunning. But that exposure is liberation. You can't heal what you won't face. Stillness becomes the space where truth can finally be seen. To live still in a restless world is to choose presence over performance. It means stepping off the treadmill of constant proving and remembering that your worth is not measured by output. This awareness transforms how you move through life. Work becomes more focused, rest becomes deeper, relationships become real. You stop multitasking through your existence and start meeting each moment as it is. Stillness is strength because it gives you perspective. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. Every problem that felt unsolvable begins to unfold differently when viewed from a calm mind. The mind in motion can only see fragments. The still mind sees the whole. This clarity doesn't just bring peace, it brings wisdom. You start making decisions that come from understanding rather than fear. The modern world teaches that productivity equals value. But productivity without awareness often leads to exhaustion. Stillness redefines success. It teaches that what you do matters less than the quality of consciousness behind it. One mindful action born of stillness can have more impact than 100 rushed decisions. Stillness aligns you with purpose. It replaces urgency with precision. The quiet heroism of stillness is not loud because it doesn't seek attention. It's the courage to live without applause. The still person walks through the noise without needing to add to it. They bring calm into rooms where others bring chaos. Their presence speaks louder than their words. They don't convince, they embody. They become a living reminder that peace is possible, even here, even now. This strength cannot be faked. It's born from experience, from repeatedly choosing presence over impulse. Stillness must be practiced, not proclaimed. Every time you resist the urge to fill silence, to check your phone, to rush ahead, you strengthen that inner muscle. Each pause is an act of reclaiming your attention from a world that profits from your distraction. Stillness also teaches humility. When you slow down, you begin to see how much of life unfolds without your control. The seasons, the breath, the beating heart. You realize that life doesn't need your interference to work perfectly. This humility doesn't make you passive, it makes you aligned. You stop trying to dominate existence and start collaborating with it. You move with the current instead of against it. Courageous stillness doesn't mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging it with greater depth. When your mind is calm, your actions become more intentional. You no longer react out of fear or ego. You respond from wisdom. This kind of presence has ripple effects. It influences environments without effort. It brings stability to others simply through energy, not words. In relationships, stillness becomes the root of empathy. When you can be silent within yourself, you can truly hear others. Most people don't need fixing. They need to be seen. Stillness allows you to hold space without projecting your own noise. It's a form of love, patient, grounded, and liberating. The still mind doesn't try to win arguments, it listens for truth. In the rush of life, stillness becomes your anchor. Without it, even success feels hollow. You may reach every goal, but the satisfaction vanishes as soon as the next desire appears. Stillness breaks that pattern. It reveals that joy doesn't come from accumulation, but from alignment. You begin to live from essence rather than effort. You don't stop moving. You just stop being moved by compulsion. This kind of stillness can't be achieved by withdrawal alone. You must learn to carry it into motion, into conversations, into work, into the noise of living. It's not about escaping movement, but finding peace within it. You can be active without being agitated, involved without being overwhelmed. Stillness is not the absence of activity, it's the presence of awareness inside it. The world calls this laziness because it misunderstands rest. Real rest is not the absence of doing, it's the presence of being. When you act from rest, your energy multiplies. When you act from restlessness, it drains. Stillness teaches you the economy of energy, how to do less but achieve more, how to speak less but mean more, how to live slower but deeper. In a society addicted to movement, being still is revolutionary because it reclaims your attention from manipulation. The systems that thrive on your distraction, consumerism, entertainment, endless productivity, lose their grip when you become still. You stop feeding them with unconscious energy. Stillness becomes an act of spiritual resistance, a quiet no to the forces that fragment the soul. This resistance doesn't come from anger, but from clarity. The still mind doesn't fight the world, it sees through it. You begin to recognize how many of your actions were driven by fear of being unseen. Stillness ends that hunger for validation. You start living from inner fullness, not external approval. You realize that the world's noise only has power if you participate in it. The heroism of stillness lies in its invisibility. No one may notice when you sit quietly, breathe deeply, or choose not to react. But that single act may change your entire day. In those moments, you're rewiring generations of conditioning. You're proving that awareness is stronger than impulse. You're teaching your body, your mind, and the collective consciousness that peace is possible. Over time, stillness becomes your default. The mind no longer runs in panic. It moves like a calm river, flowing but grounded. You begin to trust life again. You stop clinging to outcomes because you see that everything unfolds in its own time. Patience replaces anxiety. Presence replaces pressure. This is the quiet revolution happening within you. Even your perception of time begins to shift. When you are still, time feels generous. A single hour expands because you are fully there for it. When you are restless, even a full day feels insufficient. Stillness bends time, not by slowing the clock, but by deepening experience. You start to live more fully in less time. The world may continue to move fast, but your awareness becomes untouchable. You can participate in the flow of life without losing your rhythm. You begin to sense a harmony between movement and stillness, activity and awareness. A dance that no longer exhausts you, but nourishes you. The Buddha often spoke of the unmoving mind. It's not a mind that refuses to engage, but one that moves without agitation, speaks without noise, and acts without losing awareness. That is the mind of stillness, a mind that sees clearly, acts wisely, and rests deeply. When you reach this understanding, you no longer see stillness as an escape from the world, but as the world's hidden pulse. Every motion, every sound, every event arises from stillness and returns to it. You start to live in rhythm with that truth. Even in noise, you feel silence. Even in movement, you feel rest. This is the quiet heroism of stillness, not the loud victory of doing, but the silent strength of being. It takes courage to slow down when the world runs blind, to remain kind when noise provokes, to rest in awareness when distraction tempts. Yet each act of stillness is a victory, not over the world, but within it. The more you live from this awareness, the more you understand that stillness isn't the end of movement, it's the source of it. Every creative idea, every act of love, every moment of clarity arises from that unmoving center. When you touch it, you touch life at its purest point. And in that purity, something extraordinary happens. The world no longer feels like a storm you must survive. It becomes a rhythm you can dance with. You don't withdraw from its movement. You harmonize with it. You become both the stillness and the motion, both the silence and the sound. That balance, quiet inside, active outside, is true mastery. It's how peace walks through chaos without being disturbed, how wisdom speaks through noise without losing meaning. It's the kind of heroism that doesn't need recognition, because its reward is the serenity that no external world can give or take away. In a culture obsessed with motion, you become the reminder of stillness, the steady flame in the wind. You live not above the world, but fully within it, anchored in awareness, radiant in presence. That is the quiet power of stillness, the courage to simply be when everyone else forgets how. When you begin to understand the quiet heroism of stillness, something changes in how you see your entire journey. You start to realize that all the movement, all the striving, all the outer searching was never really leading anywhere new. What you were seeking, peace, meaning, clarity, was not in another place, another achievement, or another person. It was within the very awareness that was doing the seeking. The next step on this path is not outward, but inward. A journey that requires no distance, only depth. This is the inner pilgrimage, the sacred travel into the heart of your own consciousness, where every answer you've been chasing already lives. The world teaches us to travel far and wide to find meaning. We go to temples, mountaintops, teachers, retreats, searching for something that feels real. But the truest pilgrimage doesn't begin with a ticket or a destination. It begins with a turning. It happens in the instant you stop reaching outward and begin to look within. The greatest distance you will ever cross is not between countries or continents. It's the journey from the mind to the heart, from the surface of life to the depth of being. This journey inward is not a rejection of the outer world. It's a remembrance that every experience, every joy, sorrow, and discovery was always unfolding inside the field of your awareness. You were never moving through the world was moving through you. Every sound, every face, every sunset appeared within consciousness, like reflections in a still pond. Once you see this, the search for meaning outside begins to dissolve. The outer world becomes a mirror rather than a destination. To travel inward means to sit still long enough to face what you've been avoiding, the thoughts, emotions, and memories that swirl beneath the surface of constant activity. This is why so many people resist it. It's easier to move than to meet yourself. It's easier to run than to sit in silence with your own mind. But true courage lies not in climbing mountains, but in descending into the inner landscape of your being and staying there until it reveals its truth. Awareness, when turned inward, begins to reveal layers. The first layer is thought, the voice that comments on everything, that plans and remembers, that argues and explains. Most people mistake this voice for the self. But when you watch it closely, you notice it's just noise passing through consciousness. Beneath thought lies emotion, the unspoken energy that gives color to your experiences. Beneath emotion lies sensation, the raw, wordless pulse of life in your body. And beneath all of it, if you stay long enough, lies something vast and unchanging, pure awareness. That is where the pilgrimage ends, because it's where it began. When you touch that space of pure awareness, you discover something astonishing. You've never truly moved. You were never lost. All the searching, the growing, the learning, it all happened within the same still field of consciousness. You are not traveling toward awareness. You are traveling as awareness. The pilgrimage is not about reaching enlightenment. It's about realizing you were never apart from it. Every outer journey in life is a reflection of this inner journey. When you travel to new places, you're not expanding your geography. You're expanding your perception. When you meet new people, you're not discovering new souls. You're discovering new reflections of yourself. Every encounter is the universe introducing you to another version of your own consciousness. The wise realize this early and begin to walk through life differently, not as seekers, but as explorers of the infinite within. This inward movement doesn't require withdrawal from the world. You can travel inward while walking through a crowded city, while listening to music, while speaking to a friend. The key is awareness, noticing not just what you experience, but the presence that experiences it. Awareness is the true traveler. The rest is scenery. In the stillness of your own awareness, the need for escape disappears. You stop craving new destinations to distract you from yourself. You realize that the peace you were seeking through travel, possessions, or recognition was a reflection of something that never left you. This is what the great masters meant when they said, "Wherever you go, there you are." The only thing that truly changes when you travel is what you pay attention to. The inner pilgrimage is also a journey through illusion. At first, awareness encounters resistance, the ego's stories, the mind's defenses, the emotions that feel too heavy to face. The instinct is to turn away, to distract yourself again. But if you stay, if you keep breathing and watching, those barriers begin to dissolve. The walls you thought were protecting you were actually hiding you from your own light. As they fall, the path opens wider. The deeper you travel inward, the more you realize that awareness doesn't belong to you. You belong to it. You are not a person having awareness. You are awareness having the experience of being a person. This shift changes everything. It dissolves fear, because fear depends on the illusion of separation. It dissolves loneliness, because you see that awareness connects all beings. It dissolves pride, because you understand that awareness is not yours. It is life itself looking through your eyes. This is why meditation is often called coming home. It's not about creating peace or forcing silence. It's about returning to the awareness that was never disturbed in the first place. Every moment you spend resting in that awareness is a moment of arrival. You don't need to go anywhere to find it. You only need to stop leaving. As you deepen in this understanding, even outer travel takes on a new meaning. When you walk through a forest, you begin to feel that the trees are not separate from you. When you hear the sound of rain, you realize it's falling inside consciousness. The whole world becomes sacred because you no longer see it as outside yourself. The boundaries between observer and observed blur until there's only one seamless field of awareness experiencing itself in infinite forms. This awareness brings a new kind of freedom. You stop seeking experiences for fulfillment. You begin to enjoy them for what they are, expressions of life's endless creativity. You can appreciate beauty without needing to possess it. You can face pain without needing to escape it. The heart opens wider because it no longer fears change. Everything becomes part of the same journey, the movement of awareness, exploring itself. The inner pilgrimage also teaches patience. The path inward doesn't unfold all at once. Some days it feels effortless. Awareness expands naturally. Peace flows easily. Other days, the mind feels noisy again, the body restless, the heart heavy. But even those days are part of the journey. The obstacles are not detours, they are lessons. Each challenge reveals where awareness is still entangled in attachment or resistance. Seeing that clearly is progress, even when it feels like stillness. One of the most beautiful qualities of this inward journey is its humility. The deeper you go, the more you realize how vast awareness truly is. The mind, once obsessed with answers, begins to bow to mystery. You stop needing to define truth and start living it. This humility brings peace, not the peace of knowing everything, but the peace of trusting what cannot be known. The inner pilgrimage also transforms your relationship with time. When awareness deepens, you start to feel that all moments exist within the same timeless presence. Past and future lose their grip. You begin to sense that everything you've ever sought, love, safety, joy, was never in another time. It was in another depth of now. That depth is always available, but it can only be entered through stillness. This awareness changes how you experience others too. When you look into someone's eyes, you see the same awareness looking back. Every person becomes a reflection of the same essence, expressing itself differently. The boundaries of identity begin to soften. Compassion arises naturally because you recognize that what happens to another affects the same field of being that you are. As this understanding matures, even suffering becomes part of the sacred journey. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is awareness showing me through this?" Pain becomes a teacher, pointing you deeper into the present. Every difficult moment becomes an invitation to return home to awareness, to see that nothing can truly harm what you are. Inward travel also brings simplicity. You begin to see that truth doesn't require complexity. The mind loves philosophy, but awareness loves presence. You no longer feel compelled to understand everything intellectually. You rest in direct knowing, the kind that doesn't need explanation because it's felt so deeply it can't be doubted. The more you rest in awareness, the more you realize that every outer journey, whether it's love, success, failure, or loss, was only a mirror reflecting stages of your inner journey. The world was never separate from your consciousness. It was your consciousness projected outward for you to see. Once you grasp this, life stops feeling random. Every event, every person, every moment becomes part of the same teaching. The universe revealing yourself to yourself. This realization also changes your relationship with spirituality. You stop searching for enlightenment as an achievement. You realize enlightenment is not something that happens to you. It's the recognition of what has always been true. Awareness doesn't need to improve. It only needs to be seen. You begin to understand why the greatest masters say that awakening is not the gaining of something new, but the loss of something false. The inner pilgrimage also shows you that stillness is not separate from movement. Awareness is vast enough to hold both. You can live fully, love, create, work, play, while remaining anchored in presence. The journey doesn't take you away from life. It deepens your participation in it. Every act becomes meditation. Every breath becomes sacred. And eventually, the journey inward leads to something even more profound. The end of the idea of journey itself. You realize that awareness never moved, never traveled, never changed. It was the same stillness through every experience, the same silence beneath every sound. The pilgrim and the path were never two. You were always home. This realization doesn't end life, it illuminates it. You continue to live, to feel, to grow, but now you do it consciously. You move through the world knowing that the world is moving within you. You act without attachment, love without fear, rest without escape. You walk through life not as someone on a quest, but as awareness itself, playing the game of discovery for the joy of remembering. And so, the greatest journey you will ever take requires no distance, no map, and no destination. It begins and ends in the same place, the stillness of your own being. When you learn to travel inward without moving an inch, you discover that every path, every search, every longing was pointing you here, to this eternal presence that never left you, that has been silently guiding you all along. When the inner pilgrimage reaches its quiet destination, something unexpected begins to unfold. You arrive at stillness, yet what you find there is not what the mind imagined. It's not a point of completion or final certainty. It's an openness, vast, immeasurable, beyond concept. The closer you look at awareness itself, the more it dissolves any solid idea of you. What remains is not nothingness, but a living spaciousness, an emptiness that heals rather than destroys. This is the mystery of shunyata, the Buddhist understanding of emptiness, not a void that swallows life, but the boundless ground from which life endlessly blooms. Emptiness is often misunderstood. To the untrained mind, the word sounds cold, nihilistic, or lonely, as if it means life has no meaning. But in truth, emptiness is not a denial of existence. It's the freedom from distortion. It's the recognition that nothing possesses a fixed, independent identity. Everything is fluid, interdependent, and alive. To see this clearly is to be released from the prison of attachment. You stop clinging to form because you realize form is never separate from the space that holds it. The mind is used to building meaning through solidity, by naming, defining, and grasping. It wants the world to stay still so it can understand it. But when you look deeply into anything, a thought, a feeling, a person, you find it's constantly changing. There's no permanent essence to hold on to. That recognition isn't despair, it's liberation, because what can change is free. What isn't solid can never be broken. This insight, at first, can feel disorienting. When you begin to see through the illusion of permanence, the ego trembles. It says, if everything is empty, what can I depend on? But emptiness doesn't erase meaning. It reveals that meaning is not something fixed. It's something we participate in. Life becomes creative again. Like an artist standing before an open canvas, you realize that emptiness is not the end of color. It's the space that allows color to exist at all. Emptiness is also the source of compassion. When you see that nothing has a separate self, the walls between you and others dissolve. Suffering no longer appears as something happening to them, because you recognize that what moves through one being moves through all. Compassion arises naturally, not from moral effort, but from understanding. You can't harm another without harming the whole. You can't heal another without healing yourself. This is why the Buddha said that wisdom and compassion are like two wings of the same bird. Emptiness gives rise to both. The healing power of emptiness lies in its spaciousness. The mind constantly tightens around ideas. This is good, that is bad. This is mine, that is yours. Every attachment creates tension, and every tension creates suffering. When you rest in awareness of emptiness, those knots begin to loosen. You start to see that pain, anger, and fear are not enemies. They are energies temporarily frozen by resistance. Emptiness melts them, not by fighting them, but by giving them space to move. In this space, healing happens naturally. You no longer try to control your emotions. You allow them to arise and pass. You no longer force solutions. They reveal themselves in the openness. The stillness of shunyata is not passive. It's the most fertile ground there is. From emptiness, creativity, forgiveness, and renewal constantly emerge. When you stop clinging, life begins to flow again. To understand emptiness is also to understand interbeing, the truth that everything exists in relation to everything else. A tree is not just a tree, it contains rain, soil, sunlight, air, and time. You are not an isolated self. You are a convergence of ancestry, culture, memory, and awareness. Nothing stands alone because everything depends on everything else. Seeing this interconnection dissolves the illusion of separateness that causes so much fear. You realize that life is not something happening to you. It's happening through you, as you. Shunyata is not a concept to be believed, but a truth to be experienced. You can sense it directly in the spaces between thoughts, in the stillness between breaths, in the pause between one sound and the next, that space is awareness itself, infinite, formless, but alive. When you rest in it, your identity becomes porous. You stop defining yourself by your roles or your past. You begin to sense the formless presence beneath them, the part of you that was never born and will never die. This is why emptiness is healing. It frees you from the tyranny of identity. The self that suffers is always a story, a collection of memories, labels, and expectations. Emptiness doesn't destroy that story. It lets you see it for what it is, a movement of thought, a temporary expression. The moment you stop identifying with it, the story loses power. You don't have to fix yourself because there is no fixed self to fix. What a relief that is, to stop carrying the heavy idea of who you think you are. The fear of emptiness comes from the ego's misunderstanding. The ego believes it must exist as something solid to survive, but what it calls survival is really rigidity. Life itself is fluid. The river doesn't fear its flow. It finds freedom in it. The ego resists change because it mistakes movement for loss. Awareness sees change as life unfolding. Emptiness is the wisdom that allows you to dance with change instead of fighting it. When you start to live from this understanding, daily life becomes lighter. You stop arguing with reality. You stop expecting permanence from what is meant to move. Relationships become less about possession and more about participation. You begin to love without clinging, to let go without bitterness. You see that love itself is empty, not in the sense of lacking, but in the sense of being limitless. It has no fixed boundary. It moves freely through you, as you, without needing to be held. This is also why emptiness heals grief. When someone you love passes, the pain comes from the illusion of final separation. But when you understand emptiness, you realize that form has changed, not vanished. The essence that animated your loved one was never confined to a body. It's the same awareness that looks through your eyes now. Emptiness shows you that nothing real can be lost, because what is real was never born. The practice of resting in emptiness requires trust. The mind, trained to fill every space, resists the openness at first. It wants to name, control, or define what it senses. But emptiness cannot be grasped. It can only be surrendered to. You learn to let go of even spiritual ambition, the desire to reach enlightenment, the wish to become awakened. You realize there is no one to become enlightened because the awareness that seeks is already awake. The search itself dissolves into stillness. In meditation, this surrender becomes experiential. As you observe thoughts arise and fade, you begin to sense the vast silence holding them. Every thought dissolves back into the same space it came from. That space is not dead. It's luminous. It's the same emptiness that allows a flower to bloom, a wave to rise, a life to unfold. The more you trust it, the more you see that everything you thought was solid was never separate from this spacious ground. Emptiness also brings balance to compassion. Without wisdom, compassion can become exhausting, a constant effort to fix the world. But when you act from the understanding of emptiness, your compassion is guided by spaciousness. You help without attachment to outcome. You serve without burden. You realize that healing doesn't come from effort, but from presence, from allowing awareness to move naturally through you. This understanding also changes how you experience time. Emptiness dissolves the rigid structure of past and future. In deep awareness, there is only unfolding, the eternal. Now, you begin to sense that the past is not behind you. It exists as memory within the present. The future is not ahead. It exists as potential within the same stillness. Life stops being a line and becomes a field, vast, interconnected, complete in every moment. When you live from this awareness, anxiety loses its grip. Worry always comes from clinging, from believing that things must unfold a certain way. But emptiness reveals that there is no fixed script. The universe is improvising, and you are part of its improvisation. The more you trust this flow, the more peace you feel. You stop needing to control everything because you realize that everything is already held by awareness. The beauty of emptiness is that it restores wonder. When you drop the illusion of knowing, everything becomes alive again. You start to see the world not as a collection of objects, but as a living expression of consciousness, the leaf, the sound, the breath. Each is an event in the dance of emptiness. There is no center and no edge. Awareness flows freely, and in that flow, awe returns. This understanding doesn't make you detached from life. It makes you intimate with it. You see the sacredness in impermanence. You see that the beauty of a moment lies precisely in its passing. Nothing needs to be permanent to be precious. Emptiness transforms how you love, how you grieve, how you live, not by giving you something new, but by showing you what has always been free. Eventually, emptiness becomes not just a concept, but a way of being. You stop seeing form and emptiness as separate. Every sound, every emotion, every experience becomes a doorway to the same vast stillness. You can laugh, cry, work, or rest, and still feel that unbroken spaciousness beneath it all. You no longer seek refuge from life. Life itself becomes your refuge. And so, you begin to live as the space, not just within it. You become like the sky, open, accepting, allowing clouds to pass without resistance. You realize that emptiness was never empty. It was fullness too vast to be contained by form. The silence you once feared is now the cradle of creation. The space you once avoided is now your deepest comfort. This is the healing power of shunyata, the emptiness that renews rather than erases, the openness that holds everything with infinite compassion. When you rest here, you are not losing yourself. You are remembering what you've always been, boundless, luminous, and free. The mind falls silent, the heart expands, and life continues to flow, ungrasped, untouched, and beautifully whole. When you reach the understanding of emptiness, the mind becomes wide enough to hold everything. What once felt fragmented begins to reveal its wholeness. Life flows freely again, not as something to grasp, but as something to breathe. Awareness no longer struggles to control existence. It participates in it. And in that participation, you begin to notice something miraculous. Breath, the most ordinary act of living, becomes extraordinary. The breath, which you have taken countless times without attention, turns into a living bridge between body and awareness. This is where the next doorway opens, the sanctuary of breath, the infinite unfolding hidden in a single inhale. Breath is the most faithful companion you will ever have. From your first cry at birth to your final sigh, it never abandons you. It stays, quietly sustaining every moment, asking for nothing in return, yet most of us rarely meet it with awareness. We treat breathing as background, automatic, mechanical. But when you begin to observe it, when you bring your full presence to this simple act, it becomes sacred. The breath is not just air moving through the body, it is life itself expressing through you, a mantra spoken by existence without words. In Buddhist and yogic traditions, breath is called prana, or anapanasati, the direct thread between the physical and the infinite. It's the teacher that doesn't speak, but shows. Each inhale gathers the world into you. Each exhale releases you back into the world. This continuous exchange is a living reminder that you are not separate from life. You are woven into it. You are the meeting point of the universe, breathing itself in and out through form. When you begin to rest your awareness on the breath, you enter the present moment effortlessly. The mind cannot wander when it is anchored in the rhythm of life itself. Every inhale pulls you into now. Every exhale invites surrender. This rhythm becomes your meditation, your medicine, your teacher. It asks for nothing more than your attention, and in return, it reveals infinity. The breath is not just physiological, it's spiritual. It mirrors the nature of awareness, expanding and contracting, appearing and disappearing, yet never truly stopping. There is no beginning to breath, no end, just transformation. The air you exhale becomes the inhale of another being. The breath that fills your lungs right now once moved through oceans, forests, and stars. It connects all living things, silently reminding you that separation is only a thought. When you breathe consciously, you begin to feel that connection directly. The walls between you and life soften. Awareness flows through the breath like light through water. Every cell begins to hum with aliveness, not because you've added something new, but because you've removed distraction. You start to sense that the breath is not moving through you. You are moving through it. To enter the sanctuary of breath is to enter the heart of presence. The breath teaches stillness through movement. It shows that you can be both active and peaceful, both alive and serene. It becomes a living mantra that repeats, "Here, now, enough." The more you listen to it, the more it reveals. You begin to notice that each inhale carries a subtle rising, the energy of being. Each exhale carries a release, the wisdom of letting go. Together they form the dance of life, creation and surrender, effort and ease. Awareness of breath also reveals the truth of impermanence. No breath can be held forever. The inhale must become exhale, grasping turns to release. This natural cycle teaches the art of balance, how to participate fully without clinging. When you try to hold on to pleasure, it suffocates. When you resist pain, it lingers. But when you allow both to move like breath, they transform on their own. This is not philosophy, it's physics of the spirit. The breath also teaches patience. It moves at its own rhythm, unhurried, unforced. You can't speed it up to reach enlightenment, nor slow it down to avoid change. You can only align with it. This alignment is the essence of mindfulness, living in harmony with the natural rhythm of existence. When your actions follow the pace of breath, life becomes balanced. You stop rushing toward the future or dragging the past behind you. You start living from the calm pulse of now. The sanctuary of breath becomes even more profound when you notice the space between breaths. That brief pause after exhalation, before inhalation begins again. In that pause lies eternity. It's the same stillness you discovered beneath thoughts, beneath sound, beneath suffering. The breath reveals it in real time, in every moment. You begin to see that silence is not something far away. It's woven between your own breaths, waiting to be noticed. When awareness deepens, even the act of breathing becomes transparent. You no longer feel, "I am breathing." Instead, you sense, breath is happening. The doer dissolves. The ego loses ownership over the most fundamental act of life. You begin to experience what the sages call effortless being, where existence breathes itself through you. That realization is both humbling and freeing. You see that you were never in control, yet life never stopped supporting you. Breathing consciously also refines perception. When the breath slows, the mind slows with it. The nervous system begins to calm. Emotions become clearer, thoughts less chaotic. You start to sense subtleties that were once hidden. The softness of air touching the skin, the quiet pulse of the heart, the gentle rhythm of awareness itself. The breath becomes a teacher of sensitivity, a reminder that truth reveals itself in simplicity, not in noise. Through the breath, the body and awareness reunite. So often, the mind drifts far from the body, trapped in worries, replaying the past, rehearsing the future. The breath is the bridge that calls the mind home. Each conscious inhale says, "Come back." Each exhale says, "Rest here." The more often you cross this bridge, the less lost you feel. The sense of fragmentation begins to dissolve. You realize you don't have to fix yourself, you only have to return. The healing power of breath is not metaphorical. It's literal. When you breathe deeply and consciously, your body begins to regulate itself. Stress hormones subside, the heart slows, and the mind clears. But beyond physiology, the breath also heals energetically. Every conscious exhale releases emotional residue, the tension, regret, or fear stored in the body. Each inhale fills the space left behind with vitality and lightness. The more you breathe with awareness, the more life begins to circulate freely through you. In ancient teachings, the breath is often called the thread of life. It connects the invisible and the visible, the infinite and the finite. To lose awareness of breath is to become entangled in illusion. To return to it is to return to the truth of being, that you are not separate from existence, but one with it. Breath becomes prayer, not the kind made of words, but of presence. As you live in deeper awareness of breath, even movement becomes meditation. Walking, speaking, working, all become extensions of the same rhythm. You move not as a collection of thoughts, but as awareness embodied. The breath turns ordinary moments into sacred rituals. Cooking becomes an offering. Listening becomes devotion. Rest becomes union. The sanctuary of breath is also the sanctuary of trust. Each inhale happens without your effort. Each exhale follows without your command. This trust is not blind. It's experiential. You realize that life sustains you even when you forget to pay attention. This realization softens the grip of fear. If the breath knows how to continue, perhaps the rest of life does too. You begin to rely not on control, but on flow. The deeper you go into awareness of breath, the more it reveals its mystery. You start to sense that it is not merely oxygen moving in and out. It is consciousness itself, pulsing through form. In meditation, when the breath becomes almost imperceptible, awareness remains, luminous, awake, infinite. The breath has done its work. It has led you back to the formless that breathes through form. Through this realization, the boundaries between body and space begin to dissolve. The breath is no longer something you do, it's something the universe is doing. You begin to sense that the same rhythm animating your lungs moves the tides, stirs the wind, and turns the stars. The personal merges into the cosmic breathing, becomes participation in the universe itself. From this space, gratitude arises naturally. Every inhale feels like a gift, every exhale an offering. Life stops being taken for granted. Even in difficulty, you sense that as long as breath flows, presence is possible. The awareness of this truth fills the simplest moments with reverence. The sanctuary of breath is also the sanctuary of equality. Every living being, no matter their form or status, shares this rhythm. The breath of a child, a bird, a tree, all arise from the same source. When you breathe consciously, you're breathing with the world, not separate from it. Compassion deepens because you recognize that each breath connects you to countless others who are also living, loving, and longing in this shared rhythm. Ultimately, the breath teaches the highest lesson of all: impermanence and renewal. Every inhale begins, every exhale ends. Yet in that ending, there is space for beginning again. Breath reminds you that death and life are not opposites. They are partners in the same cycle. The end of one breath is not loss, it's transition. In that recognition, fear begins to fade and peace takes root. The breath, in its simplicity, carries the entire wisdom of the universe. It mirrors emptiness through space, compassion through exchange, impermanence through rhythm, and presence through repetition. You don't have to understand these truths intellectually. You can live them through each breath you take with awareness. When you finally surrender fully to this rhythm, the boundary between the breather and the breath disappears. Awareness breathes itself. The sanctuary of breath becomes the sanctuary of being, infinite, intimate, and whole. And in that moment, you realize that the universe has been whispering its mantra through you all along, one inhale at a time. At the end of this journey, everything returns to where it began, within. Every lesson, every breath, every still moment has been pointing toward the same truth, that the peace you search for in the world has always lived quietly inside you, the inner monastery, the silent witness, the refuge beneath restlessness, the sanctuary of self-returning. Each is another doorway leading back to your center. Within you, there is a stillness and a sanctuary that no chaos can touch. It's not hidden in temples, mountains, or philosophies. It's in your breath, in your awareness, in the quiet courage to simply be. When you rest there, life no longer feels like something to control. It becomes something to honor. So, take a moment now. Breathe, soften, and return home to yourself. You don't have to become anything more. You only have to remember what has never left you. If this message resonated with you, share your reflection in the comments. What part of these teachings spoke most deeply to you today? Your insight might be the light someone else needs. And if you'd like to keep walking this path of awareness together, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, because every week we return here to stillness, to wisdom, and to the sanctuary within.